Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of the NHS Wales Joint Commissioning Committee. Good to see you. Sorry, we're starting slightly later than planned. We have quite a large agenda ahead of us today, but I'm going to change the agenda slightly and bring one of the items forward. We've got a number of members of the public who are here for one particular item, and that's in relation to the EMERT paper. And I'm proposing that that's brought forward after the Chief Commissioner's report, before we then move on to the rest of our agenda. This meeting is a meeting held in public. It's not a public meeting, and therefore, if members of the public are present, if they can keep their cameras turned off and their microphones muted. Angela Mutlow is here from Price. Welcome to you. And I believe Nick Woods is attending from Welsh Government. We have a number of apologies from Paul Mears and Claire Thompson, who's representing him. Phil Clure, Lee Davis is representing him, and also Adrian Clark, Director of Mental Health and Vulnerable Groups, and Joe Dayton is deputising. Are there any declarations of interest that anyone wishes or needs to make in relation to items on this agenda? Obviously, there's a declaration of interest forms that have been completed, but if there is anything that emerges during the course of the meeting, please do declare there's that point in this moment. I've had circulated the minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of September. First of all, can I see if there's any issues in terms of accuracy that anyone wishes to flag? No, then are we happy to confirm those as a correct record of our proceedings? Thank you, they're approved. Action log, Aaron, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So there are a number of actions that are closed because they have either been completed or added to the forward plan. So I won't go into the detail for those, but I will comment on those that remain open. The first of which is an update on our appointment of Director of Public Health. I know I've spoken to Yolo before the meeting, and that appointment is referred to as imminent in September. We've had some difficulties pushing that through the track system, but we're hopeful that post will be out this week or early next week at the latest. So by the time it comes to the next meeting, that appointment should be closed off. Moving down to the next open action, it's in relation to an update on gender services. I know work continues on that, and Joe Dayton's in the room will be able to provide a verbal update to see where we've got to on that.
Yes, they will be reviewing the service using the same review process as we use for our other JCC Commission services. Review will be looking at pathways, performance, quality and capacity, and we're hoping to complete that by the end of the financial year.
I presume that we engage the providers in those conversations part of the co-creation process.
Thank you, Joseph. The next update relates to fragile services and the request that a future strategy session look at that to focus on what improvements need to be made. That work is being undertaken within our IMTP process at the moment, and I think the steer is from Joseph. We'll consider whether we need to bring that back once we've undertaken that work at a future date. And the last open action relates to NHS infrastructure concerns and capital allocations. Conversations are still ongoing with Welsh Government. Stacey is meeting with Howell next week, and we're also going to flag this as an issue within our IQPD session with Welsh Government later this week. So those conversations are continuing to move, but it's still moving at the moment.
Thank you. Any issues that wishes to flag in relation to the action log, or any actions that we've missed? Thanks. My report, I'm happy to take this as read, just to highlight in particular the Chief Commissioner. As you know, Hugh has been interim Chief Commissioner for about 9 months now. His time with us will be coming to an end in the middle of spring of next year. So we are starting the process to recruit a new Chief Commissioner. That's been done in discussion with Welsh Government. And also colleagues from Cwmtâp and Gynnig as the hosting body. We are looking to go live with recruitment slightly before Christmas, but letting that run into January. That was the advice of the recruitment consultants, and looking to the process to be concluded by the beginning of March. And again, I'll be looking to Chief Executive and lay member colleagues and staff members from the JCC to be involved in that process in different ways, but just to let people know that that has now started. Happy to answer any questions on my report. Thank you, Chief Commissioner's report.
Thank you. Again, I'll take my report as read, but maybe I'll just highlight 3 issues, or maybe 4 issues. One is one of the constant conversations we've had throughout this year is the level of resource within JCC and the concerns about the level of vacancies. You'll see there that the push on recruitment throughout the summer is now half the vacancy rate. And there's further appointments taking place over forthcoming months and everything. So I think we're at a much more sustainable position now. And hopefully we'll see the benefit of all the new people joining us over the next couple of months. So just that was positive. In terms of the SLT, just really an update in terms of what's in the paper today. So there's been a number of processes taking place internally over recent months. And I attended the Cumtav Morgana Remuneration Terms of Service Committee last week. So I'm pleased to say that Stacey was reappointed as the Deputy Chief Commissioner for another year. And grateful for Stacey for all the support she gives me in that role, and also delighted that George has been appointed substantively into the role that she's been doing on an interim basis this year. So great news on both of those. The Director of Mental Health, Commissioner of Mental Health and Vulnerable Groups has been out to advert. We closed the advert last week. We had quite a number of applicants. We've managed to shortlist 4 people, and Hayley will be assisting us in interviews next week, I think it is now. So hopefully we'll make progress on that next week. Just a few other quick bits and pieces in terms of through their programme work. I undertook last, I think it was September JCC meeting to look in more detail about the resource requirements in terms of the pieces of work which have been coming at us. It's slightly out with the plan for this year. The reality is there will always be a number of bits of work that people would see the benefit of somebody commissioning or undertaking the commissioning process on a national basis, joint commissioning as opposed to specialist commissioning. These may not mean following through the whole commissioning process to do any actual commissioning, maybe just actually helping to gather people in terms of good practice, common approach, etc. So we've recognised that in the structures. We'll accommodate that, and going forward, having had conversations within the team, Ross has agreed that we will add this to Ross's directorate next year. It seems the sensible place to put it for a number of reasons, but it is our only directorate that actually is commissioning services on an all-Wales basis. So that's where we'll pick that work up next week, and we'll go through the internal process to make sure we structure that accordingly. I most probably leave it there, although I would say both Yolo and Suzanne have been approached. We're taking forward. We've had some very productive meetings in terms of PETIC and PET scanning, and we've agreed an approach with colleagues from Cardiff, Welsh Government, and Cardiff University, which we'll implement over the next couple of weeks.
Thanks very much, Hugh. Any questions?
Only I know I always bang on about capacity within the team, so they sound like a step record. Progress on filling vacancies, I think, is smashing, and congratulations to people who've got the appointments as well. I think I've had concerns about the amount that's coming to us in terms of sort of national work and support the fact that we need to be adequately resourced or adequately reassured about the capacity. But I think Hugh's comments are entirely pragmatic as well. There are issues of national commissioning, and it's entirely right that they sit with us. Seems a sensible approach to sitting Ross's directorate as well. So I will sound alarm bells in the future if I need to, but recognise the update on that. And yeah, not good news on the lowering vacancy rate as well.
Thanks very much, Paul. Any other comments or questions for the Chief Commissioner's report? No, great, thank you. Then we note that report. Thank you much, Hugh. I'm now going to change the agenda slightly and bring forward item 5.3, which is the emergency medical retrieval and transfer service update. I'm going to ask Ross to introduce the report. I'm conscious colleagues from CLIS have some points they may wish to raise as well if they're not covered off in the introduction. Ross.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So this paper, in essence, aims to set out two things, or to identify two things. So one of which is to update the committee in terms of the legal proceedings in relation to the decision made around the consolidations in the bases in April 2024, and then to set out some proposals around the next steps for recommendations. So as we've discussed previously, the decision was subject to a judicial review. That process has taken place throughout 2025, including a number of approaches around appeal, both to the High Court and an appeal direct to the Court of Appeal. All of those applications have now been dismissed, and the legal proceedings around that decision are now complete. And therefore then leads us on to the proposals around the implementations of next steps. So the paper sets out the current position in relation to recommendations 1 to 3 and recommendation 6. So those recommendations outlined at the start of the paper, but essentially around the process of the consolidation of the base and the work they are as charity to do so. The charity has stood up its delivery programme and associated work streams, and it is working with both EMRTS colleagues and its aviation partner Gamma to undertake that. There are currently commercial sensitivities around the detail of that, but as soon as those are resolved, we'll bring forward a more detailed update to the committee, both from the charity's perspective in terms of the progress they're making, but also from a service perspective in relation to the EMRTS service and the steps they need to undertake to go on to deliver the decision made by the committee. Then I'll come on to recommendation 4, and I think it's probably important to recognise at this point that this is, this is an area of concern, and it's probably why we have the public and Congressman Fleiss joining us today, because it's clearly an important issue for us to take forward. So members will recall that we undertook work during 2024 following the decision that they made through a task and finish group that was represented by Healthfield and WAS colleagues. And that task and finish group delivered a range of commissioning intentions that were endorsed by the committee in November last year. But we'll also recognise that in response to the legal proceedings that we paused further work in relation to those commissioning intentions in March, in order to avoid any issues in terms of how the legal proceedings resolved ultimately. Sorry. So as those legal proceedings are now concluded, there's been an understandable shift, I guess, in focus around the delivery of recommendation 4. The paper today sets out the request to the committee to support the revisiting of the work around recommendation 4. And whilst we have, of course, received concerns from Fleiss and others around what does that revisiting mean, does it mean in practice, I think it's really important to point out that there isn't an intention to disregard our previous commitments or positions, but to ensure that the work we undertook previously, those commissioning intentions, and any proposal that falls out of those from the provider is fully aligned to all of the changes that occurred within the pre-hospital care environment over the last year, not least of which the performance framework changes to the Welsh Ambulance Services, changes around handover improvements, and of course our financial and performance position of the service overall. And that any decisions the committee ultimately make around recommendation 4 are done within the context of the committee's full responsibility across the entire breadth of its portfolio. And the paper sets out that the best vehicle for undertaking that is through our discussions in relation to the IMTP for 26 onwards. And then finally coming to recommendation 5, so we previously committed to undertaking a lessons learned exercise in relation to recommendation 5, and I'm working with Aaron, the board secretary, to bring that forward for the committee. I'll pause at that point, Chair, just to take any questions, but
yeah. And just to be clear, this is the first opportunity that we've had since the 15th of October to bring a paper to the Joint Commissioning Committee. It's our first meeting since that took place.
Yes, in relation to the findings of the judicial review, ultimately, yes.
And just say a bit about that. So the decision to pause any further work on recommendation 4 was completely linked to the elements within the judicial review where there were clear elements related to specifically recommendation 4, so it would have been appropriate for us to.
Yeah, no. So colleagues and people who are involved within judicial review will recognise that the one of the arguments put forward by the claimant was that the committee erred in its decision around recommendations 1 to 3 without having the detail of recommendation 4, and the collective position put forward by health boards as their defence was in relation to the fact that they were to address distinctly different needs. That position for the health boards was supported by the court, but notwithstanding the legal position, we clearly need to do further work in terms of progressing the commitments that we've previously made.
Thank you very much. So key to hear views from members of the committee in relation to the paper that's set before us, to any observation that Ross, to the introduction that Ross has made. I know colleagues from Clyde will also be keen to ask and pose some questions. And perhaps actually that might be worthwhile doing now. If there's not, you may have had answers already from what Ross has said, but anything else you wish to pull out?
Thank you. I've got a few, so if I just go through a few and then you might want to take them all as one. So, you're right, the public are concerned about what is happening next. Recommendation 4, and we completely respect that the situation needs to be paused while the judicial review took a stance. That's completely right. But the public really want to know the commitment to recommendation 4. Is that still going to move forward? Committee made a commitment that no bases would close until recommendation 4 was implemented. Does that still stand? You commented about the development plans will now look at your 2026-29 IMTP, but you can imagine the concern that will raise for the public for some time yet, so that they're really eager to understand what is going to be offered. If it's not going to be the bespoke road service, is it going to be something else? And is that going to be happening in the next year? Or are we talking 4 or 5 years down the line? So that's the public concern. And then finally as well, if recommendation 4 is going to be formed or a different service based on the work that you'll be doing, just a commitment really that will follow the Welsh Government service change guidance, and people will have a voice in the design of whatever service comes out of that work.
Thanks. Ross, do you want to pick up those few points now, and then I'll ask I know Hayley and Carol wish to.
Yeah, so I guess in terms of timelines and base closure, etc. So I think, look, what I'm not proposing here is a very long, protracted piece of work. We have an IMTP process that is in place. We will have to have, or we'll bring forward an IMTP for the committee to make a decision on in March of this year. I anticipate that we undertake that revisiting of the work, the reconsideration of the proposed, or the bringing forward of a proposal aligned to that, to the committee in line with those timelines. We are attempting to deliver a 3-year IMTP, but the IMTP will contain our priorities for each of the units within it. In relation to the engagement element, I think we'll need to work with you in understanding whatever we're bringing forward following the work about what that means in terms of the requirements for engagement, and we're relying, I guess, on your advice around that.
It may be, I'm keen to hear from colleagues. We may want to make sure that whilst the IMT will be one consolidated document, we may want to specifically address this issue distinctly, but linked to the IMTP sometime early in the new year. I think that might be the approach.
I would just emphasise, the reason the paper sets out that I think the best vehicle for undertaking this review is through discussion around the IMTP. Is clearly any proposal we put forward for recommendation 4 does not operate in isolation for the broader ambulance service and the broader system. So I think it's really important to have those discussions alongside the broader developments that are happening across the portfolio.
Can I just, sorry, just a point. So I think it's a time frame. So 26 to 29 seems a long time away. So I think the public will want to know, are we talking about 26 or are we talking about 29 or something in the middle? And also recognising that the committee made a commitment to the services, the no basis closing, depending on the discussion today, just like some clarification that we're saying now that actually we've moved on from that, and that commitment doesn't stand because of where we are in the world right now.
So I think there's a number of things there. I think there's a work with the charity in terms of around the implementation arrangements for them when we're able to bring the detail on that forward. And then I think obviously there's the following consideration of the committee of a proposal that we bring forward once we've revisited the commissioning intentions and ensuring that they meet the needs that we originally designed this recommendation to meet, and then seeing how those two things coalesce. So I think we need to bring the detail of that forward as part of the future updates we bring to the committee.
Hayley, then Carol.
Thank you, Ross, and thanks for the update, and particularly helpful to hear Llais's questions as well. So couple of points from me. You know, we were doing work on this, and as we all know, we put it on hold whilst the legal process was being followed. So I think from my point of view, I completely understand the need for us to look at this recommendation in the context of the overall model. And how that fits together in relation to us being able to improve the integrated medium-term plan for the Joint Commissioning Committee. So really supportive of that. I think it's about public trust and confidence now in being able to see the detail around what is the proposal, what is the detail around the model, and how this all fits together. And I think the points that Llais raised about how people are involved in that is really important for us, and in particular as a rural health board in Powys, you know, I'd be keen to make sure, as we did in the early work before it was paused, to make sure that we've got the right clinical involvement from health board colleagues, WAST and other colleagues, to make sure that we get this right, but also that voice of the patient is important. So I think from my point of view, it's just really being able to, I really like the suggestion of the chair that we would have some further detail coming back in the new year on this, so that we can actually take the public through in this committee the work that has been undertaken and be really clear then around the implementation timescale, because I think it's important, just because it's in the 3-year plan of the IMTP, that might come across to the public as if we're pushing decision making out. So I think it'll be really important when it comes back for us in January that we see a very clear implementation path. So thanks.
Thanks, Hayley. Carol, then Nicola.
Diolch, bore da pawb, morning all. My points are actually similar to Hayley, so I'll just run through them quite rapidly. I think the biggest issue is the to a response to emergencies in highly rural areas, whether it's REC4, whether it's the air ambulance-based change. I think that is the core anxiety of people, and I think we've got to address that with people. That's perceived loss of service, I think, is the core issue we've got to really deal with, and that in how we address that will give confidence, I hope. So I'd agree a very clear timeline, because that 3-year window is very long, to 2029. So a very clear timeline. I support the comment about January. And then if we could have a very clear route on co-design and engagement, that would be helpful also in January, if that's possible. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thanks, Carol. You were breaking up slightly, but I think we picked up most of that. But I think your point is well made. Nicola, then Leah.
Yeah, just agree with Hayley and Carol. I think having a clear implementation plan so we can provide some clarity to Llais and the public is really important. And I think what we need to set up the commission intentions is to be able to demonstrate our commitment is we want to improve response times for ambulance services, recognising there's a specific change here that we need to be mindful of. But I suppose I'm making the same, the rurality issue is a challenging one. We've got in lots of parts of Wales, including my catch Monmouth, and I'm less directly affected by this one, but it is making sure we've got a response service in whichever way that is considered in the context of our wider ambulance capacity. So I'm quite keen to make sure we look at it in the wider round, as well as deal with the specific questions that I think people are expecting a response to on the back of what we've been through. So,
but thank you, Neil.
Yeah, I just wanted to thanks, Sharon. I just wanted to say, my understanding is that the reason we're looking at this again in context is that the context has changed radically. The expectations of ambulance services, the sort of times and things like that have changed a lot, and we have to look at it again because we can't deliver what we were thinking about delivering months ago. It's not appropriate now because we just have to look at how we deliver it. It is absolutely not a reflection that we don't want to deliver it. We absolutely want to do this, and we're not in any sense pushing it down the road. It's just that things have changed, and it would be inappropriate and irresponsible not to take that into consideration when we're designing it. I think that's what you were saying, right? And that's what I want to happen. And I'm sure that's what the committee wants to happen. Absolutely don't think it's like, oh yeah, 2029. Absolutely not. That would not be good enough whatsoever. What we're looking at is delivering it in the best way possible, the most appropriate way possible, and as soon as possible as we can. Well, that's what my feeling is, and I hope the committee's feeling is.
Thanks. Yeah. Any other, Suzanne?
No, just to kind of take the opportunity. So I'm really supportive of meeting the needs of the population, and we have to do that in the best possible way. And I understand that we made a commitment to do that when we discussed this back in April 2024. We articulated an intention to address what was seen as the potential gap in service and what was causing the majority of concern. And as far as I'm concerned, that intent continues. The question is, how do we meet that intent? And I think it is appropriate to just review that in the basis of a change in what we see in ambulance availability as a result of the improvements in handover and in the resourcing more broadly. But we have to meet that requirement. That's the commitment we've made. And so I look forward to seeing the detailed recommendations that will fulfil that commitment made.
Thank you, Suzanne. I'll bring you back. Abby, then Paul.
Yeah, thank you very much. And first of all, just to declare my interest in that Swansea Bay University Health Board is the host for the EMERT, so involved in the conversation about the model moving forward. Just to give my support to the recommendation, Chair, recognise that bringing this in as part of the IMTP process, notwithstanding the need to give certainty in the way that's been described, is really important. But I think recognising that the challenges and balance of all of the risks that we'll be facing next year that we'll need to take into consideration as part of that IMTP work, recognising that the outline budget for next year is looking very challenging. So welcome having that conversation more broadly, as I said, notwithstanding the commitments that we've given and the need to make sure we take those decisions in the round as part of the IMTP process. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. Then I'll bring colleagues back in from Clive and we'll put this together.
Yeah, just to echo what colleagues have said about, we need to take into account the wider context. I think that's important. And what Abby said is also important, the transparency and clear criteria for decision-making process, compliance engagement has been really positive. But in the existing proposal, we talked about it within existing resource envelope as well. So we need to be clear about whether we're still adhering to that criteria. But I think spirit of transparency and clear criteria for decision making are absolutely important. But yes, a time has elapsed, so the model needs to take into account the wider context and what's changed, what's improved as well.
Angela,
yes, thank you. Public trust is really important, isn't it? And I think public comms is really important to enable the trust for the public. And even though there's nothing to say, it's even more important to say that there's nothing to say, that we are developing the plans, because in lieu of any public comms, people will put two and two together and come up with a different equation, and that doesn't help with the trust. So I think I would just urge you to keep the public comms going.
Thank you, really valuable point. Do you have anything to say?
No, that's very helpful. Yeah, and I think sometimes you err away from saying nothing, don't you? But I think you're right in terms of saying nothing sometimes creates more questions. And I think the conversation today, I think transparency is absolutely clear, and that's what we're committed to bring the transparency in terms of the recommendations and the workings on the recommendations. The context is important. Yeah, waiting times 45, and the new performance framework for ambulance is changing the context. And Ross is working with colleagues in the Ambulance Trust to actually look at the, what that means for it. I think the other context is going to be important. We don't know where we're going to be next year yet financially, but I think everybody's got quite a good guess that it's going to be extremely tight. And that needs to be a context in terms of we need to make these decisions in the context of our overall decision making and prioritisation next year as well. So I think we're committed to actually bringing that back as part of the IMTP process, but with separate clarity in terms of the item in the early next year.
Really helpful. So we've been asked to note the report today, but I think perhaps let's give that with a bit of specificity around that. We're noting the report in the context of recommendation 4. Our commitment to responding to recommendation 4 hasn't changed. The issue is how, and that's where further work is taking place, and that that will be considered as part of the development of the IMTP, but we'll bring back a specific element of that, focusing solely on recommendation 4, so that the issue around public confidence and trust is dealt with appropriately. People happy with that approach? Great, thank you very much, and useful conversation. We'll go back now to the earlier part of the agenda, and we're bringing forward the feedback from chairs of committees early on, so first of all, Steve, is there anything you wish to say in relation to the Quality and Safety and Outcomes Committee, or we have to take the report read?
Indeed, as read, Chair.
Thank you. Any questions for Susan from the team report? No, note that. Planning, Performance and Finance Committee, Paul, anything you wish to?
Only briefly, take it as read, just to say the timescales, the timetables have been amended. So actually what we'll be doing is reviewing performance and planning on a prospective basis. So the assurance mechanism will be looking at reports that before they come to the JCC full board. And I think that's really important in respect to the insurance mechanism. So thanks to the corporate team for helping in timetabling that. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Any questions on the Finance Performance Committee audit?
Thank you, Chair. So it's just really, I take the paper as read, but the report is shared to demonstrate sort of the assurance provided to CTM as our host that our systems of internal controls are operating as effectively as they should do. A similar report will be shared at CTM's board this week, but if there are any questions or concerns with regards to sort of the risks, the internal audit work, or sort of our financial control procedures that anybody has, I'm welcome to hear those now, but I think I'll touch on the risk a bit more detail on the next agenda item.
So obviously we've got a specific item on our risk register imminently, but any specific questions on the report relating to the audit committee? Okay, next item then is item 2.4, the risk register.
Thank you, Chair. So the organisational risk register will be a template and report that you're used to receiving. It demonstrates our extreme risks, those scoring 15 out of 25 or above, and is shared with the committee to maintain oversight of some of the risks we're battling with and working through over the course of the year. The risks are also shared with our Quality, Safety, Outcomes and Plan Performance Finance Committee to provide some reassurance. And I suppose there are 2 new risks that have been added to the organisational risk register from commissioning services, which are hereditary anemias and women's and children's services post not being advertised. There's also been a risk that's been de-escalated regarding business continuity. So members of the SLT team are in the room if there are any questions that people wanted to raise in relation to specific risks. But I suppose the update I wanted to provide specifically was on the work we're undertaking to sort of rejig how we're reporting risk and how we're looking to deal with this in the future. So I'll pause if there are any questions regarding specific risks or sort of how we're managing those in the first instance and come in after that.
So anything which is flagged in relation to the current risk register and the approach to risk? I guess one question from me is, this has changed, hasn't it, in terms of some of the risk scoring? Didn't we have ambulances as almost certain catastrophic?
So we did. So I suppose there have been updates that have been shared since this risk register was received in September, which reflected the July position. Our August position was shared with 2 subcommittees to show how that shift has moved. We've also fed that risk update into the Assurance and Risk Committee at CTM as well. So there has been a movement and that risk has de-escalated, yes, yeah.
Any other points? Yes, Luke.
Yeah, thanks. Just on risk 84, the financial break even 25-26. So just wondered, I guess in light of some discussions we're going to have later today, we've got it as a likelihood of almost certain, but impact of moderate. And I just wonder whether we still deem it only moderate impact given some of the decisions that we're going to need to make.
So let's perhaps look at that, and that's something we can review when we get to that item on the agenda. Perhaps, but good point to flag. Abby?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to note in respect of risk 69 on the coloured articulation of all of the risks, paediatric radiology, and just to note for all members of the committee to be aware, our independent review of maternity and neonatal services, which reported in July, flagged this as an issue. Clearly, it's not within Swansea Bay's gift to resolve the recommendation, but it stands as one of the recommendations around risk to service delivery and impact. So I'm sure colleagues are probably aware of that, but I would be grateful if that was formally noted so that we can see the connection back with our local service independent review. Thank you, Chair.
So that touches on a point that I'm going to come into later on, is sort of feeds into the appendix 2 that's been shared as well. So as part of the wider work we're doing, we're looking to restate and redescribe this risk register. So it's more commissioner focus, and part of that process we'll add an additional column, another column on a spreadsheet. So apologies in advance to operational colleagues, but we're looking to tie in sort of what our commissioner-based risks are, but then also reflect how that ties into sort of the organisational risk registers at health boards as well, to make sure that we've got that full line of sight on the sort of the wider NHS Wales. So that work is ongoing. It's tied into sort of the reorganisation request and risk updates. We were requesting these on a monthly basis, but we felt that we weren't giving actions and mitigations enough time to bed in and develop things and for the risk register to move. So we will report on a bi-monthly basis. The risks will go to subcommittees first, and there's a table or sort of timetable in the report which sets out how we'll look at that. And then the detailed scrutiny will take place at subcommittees, and then those subcommittees and their assurance reports and highlight reports will confirm that they're content with the work that's been undertaken. And we will be able to have this conversation here as well. But the overarching aim is to get to a position where this comes to the committee for noting on the basis that the subcommittee reviewed it. And then we'll have a joint assurance framework which looks at our strategic risks and how we're able to tackle them as a joint committee. So that's the longer term vision of where we're looking to get. But in the background, we are rejigging how we're reporting things on a bi-monthly basis. But the real work is going into how we're describing risks. So I think that we've had some feedback from lay members kindly, and I think and we've reflected, and there is some work that we need to do on our actions, how we're describing things. So if we do look to describe things from more of a commissioner focused lens, I think that will give us an ability to sort of manage our controls and actions more effectively and describe those, because we'll be managing risks that are actually ours rather than provider-based risks. So we're very much in the early stages of that. The examples shared in the appendix have been sort of approved by operational teams internally. We've also behind the scenes rewritten all of the risks that are on the risk register. So we're trying to lead the team with us to make sure that this is as easy and as smooth a process as possible. But hopefully by January, you will see a fairly different, a different risk register to give you a bit of assurance that we're managing the commission risks we hold, also with a view on what's happening across the wider patch as well. So just looking for some support or some endorsement of our approach, as well as noting the risks that are described.
Thanks, Shimmy.
It wasn't about that particular thing, but it was about another risk.
Let me hold that then for a moment. So just in terms of the approach to risk, I think it makes a huge amount of sense that we are demonstrating in our risk register what we have control over, and the commissioner risk is what we have control over. So it's really important that we also then get assurance as a commissioner that our providers are then looking at delivery of what we're commissioning, and so we need to be cited on that. But primarily it's about commissioner risk for us, and seeing it through that framing I think is really helpful from my perspective. But Abby and then Susan, and then I'll move on to Shamim's point.
Yeah, what Aaron's just described is hugely helpful, and I think it'll also help us ensure alignment of, as you say, in terms of the commissioner risks and then the risk that we are managing as providers, and how those two things need to come together as part of the commissioning process. So I really welcome that. And Aaron, I'm sure you'll take it through the directors of corporate governance as well, because I think that will be the peer group, because I think that will be really welcomed. So thank you.
Susan?
Just to support what Abby has said, and to say in terms of the work that has been done by Aaron and colleagues, I think brings a coherence and congruence to the risk register. So it's very welcome. Thank
you. Suzanne on that?
Yeah, no, thanks, Aaron. I, like others, really think that the commissioning risk clarification is really important. So that's really good to hear. I think a general observation is that a lot of these risks have been reviewed and the risk is unchanged, which tells me the mitigation is ineffective, or what does it tell me? Maybe is the question. And I do wonder if, alongside the work you're doing, we have a think about the risk appetite. How is that articulated within that kind of commissioning lens? Because often the unchanged ones are sitting in the provider risk space. But there are real and genuine reasons, I suspect, why these things move forward. But if no action is being taken as a result, and we're just looking at it, that isn't good either.
I agree. Andy?
Yeah, I agree. I think the risk appetite piece for me is really important. I really want to see it in the revised example, and linking it back to the organisational risk again is really important. So we do see the difference between the commissioning risk and what's going on in the provider world. I also think, and I've fed back to Aaron and Maxine as well, is that there is much further work to be done around controls and the actions, because for me the actions that are shown aren't necessarily actions, some of them are narrative. So I think that's the piece, and I know that Aaron and the team are looking at that as the next phase. So I really welcome this, because I think it really does articulate the difference between what we are responsible for as the JCC. So thank you.
Something you wish to say in terms of just the approach?
So I'd take those comments on board. So in terms of the approach, by moving to bi-monthly reporting as opposed to monthly reporting, that sort of fallow month I've described, and we are meeting with teams to make sure we're helping refine those things. We met with Mel's team already, and there is an appetite, not a comment on this, but an appetite to get involved in this process as well. So they say it's a work in progress, but we're hoping you will start to see some improvements in the coming months.
Brilliant, thank you. Shamim?
It was about risk 91, but I can pick up about Mel's report. It was more detail about that.
Okay. All right, so let's make sure we pick that up in a moment around hereditary anemia service. So really helpful, thank you. So we note the report. We also, sorry, Nia.
Oh, I agree with what Susanne was saying about actions. There's no point taking actions if they don't actually do anything. And if we are taking actions and don't do anything, we need to take different actions, as she said. Right? And we need to be really strict about that, because there are some things here that are just a tale of woe that going on for months and months and nothing's budged. Well, that's not good enough. Yeah. But the other thing is, this is just about running the meeting, really. Do you know how many Appendix 1s there are in this document? There's about 55 Appendix 1s or something. Can we just, when you're looking at a document, for the sake of everybody, not just, I know we've read the things, but for the sake of everybody, can you just say what page out of 244 pages we're on? Because I'm spending half my time just to check, just because I know I read it, but I just want to check again. It's hard enough to deal with as it is, but would you just tell us what page we're on? Yeah.
Thank you. That's point well made. Abby?
Yeah, just reflecting on the comment about some of the risks that don't seem to be shifting. I guess there's something about being really explicit where we are having to tolerate something, and you know, we're trying to look at the sort of 4 T's in terms of how we approach some of these risks, because the challenges we're facing, and particularly as we go into needing to make some very difficult commissioning decisions against a backdrop of many demands and really challenging financial environment, that there's something about where we are having to tolerate a risk and what that means, as opposed to always having a mitigation and being able to manage it. So it's just a reflection on the comments that have been made previously. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Hugh.
Thanks, Abby. And I think my point was actually going to pick that up, actually. I think for me, there is, when we look at the risk appetite and the risk control environment, there's a whole conversation here. I think some of the concerns that people are bringing up today relate to the fact we're not differentiating between commissioner risks and provider risks. What is the real risk to us as a commissioner? I think at times the narrative is describing more of the risk of the provider. So that piece works for me really important. And I was going to say exactly the same as Abby there. Some of the scores won't change. Some of the scores, depending on our risk appetite, we'll be tolerating. And I think that's the next degree of sophistication we need on this risk register going forward. And it's a little bit circular, isn't it, in terms of whether the control or, I think the piece of work needs to be looked at as a whole.
So it sounds like we're on a journey. It sounds like we have taken some really key decisions in terms of the approach that we have agreed to take as a committee, as outlined in the paper, and I've heard that that's welcomed by committee members. I guess it's about now seeing the revised risk register coming back to us in the new year. I'm sure this is going to be an iterative process as well, and we'll want to adapt that and change it as we move forward. But I think that the course of travel is welcomed by the committee. Great, thank you very much. Moving on then to the directorate reports. Again, colleagues, assume we've read them. Tease out anything particularly you wish to bring to our attention, and no doubt there'll be some issues from committee members. So, ambulance services on 111, Ross.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Taking that view that you've already read them. What I've deliberately attempted to do, I think, based on previous feedback, is provide an update under each of the services within my portfolio. So hopefully, committee members find that helpful. I think just a couple of issues I'd pull out is in relation to the phase 1 changes to the ambulance performance framework. In October, we were able to publish the first 3 months worth of data related to additional clinical indicators that we haven't previously published. So we now produce information in relation to the average pain score change for patients experiencing pain and the impact the pain and the impact the ambulance service has on them. Average oxygen saturation changes, so for those patients who require improvement in the oxygen saturations, that's been delivered. And the top 3 core categorizations following an attendance at scene to have a better understanding of the type and nature of conditions that patients are experiencing within the red category in particular. Phase 2 changes to the performance framework are due to go live next week on the 2nd of December. I know my paper talks about some existing risks. That's a timing issue in terms of when this paper was produced. The WASP board have held an extraordinary meeting to seek assurance around their own internal organisation processes for delivery of that. And myself and WASP executives are meeting with WASP government colleagues later today as a pre-launch meeting for that work to happen next week. We've touched on earlier in the discussion around the improvements to handover. So as discussed, there has been significant handover improvement in both Wales, resulting in that risk being reduced earlier this year. Clearly, as we're heading into the winter period, we're seeing some challenges around that. There's further work happening to try and ensure that that improvement continues. We are working with helpful colleagues to support them with the provision of information so they understand the system and the efforts that they need to make. I've also added in a chart in terms of the improvement to the AMBER 95th percentile. So colleagues see there has been quite a substantial improvement in the 95th percentile. As handovers come down. Some of that improvement is more marked if you look at a local level where handover improvements have happened more quickly or to a greater extent. But we are working with WASP to ensure that the freeing up of the capacity is having a material impact on the outcomes and the response for patients. And then just touching on a couple of the risks that I outlined later in the paper. So we will bring forward Manchester Arena inquiry. We are writing up our report following the work that we've done with the ambulance service and with helpful colleagues to assess that case over the last year. And we are just finalising the arrangements for the external review that committee members also asked for. Next, capacity issues. We've raised there a number of times before. Colleagues from Health will be aware there's a reset week happening around the system in early December. Part of the work we're working with with Helpful Colleagues and have brought Helpful Colleagues together on that, is to set out a range of actions to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of discharge processes with non-emergency patient transport. And just a thanks to me, really, operational Helpful Colleagues have been really, really helpful in that. I think there's a layer of work coming together with WASP and Helpful Colleagues that, if we can implement consistently, have real opportunity to improve the utilisation and the effectiveness of that next resource, and hopefully avoid patients having to have additional night stay before discharge. We're deliberately avoiding additional capacity going in at this point, because I think there's a lot of work to be done in terms of delivering that improvement. I've outlined the neonatal transfer services risk, but I'll pick that up in the neonatal paper later on. And just to make colleagues aware, there's increasing questions and concern around right care, right person. I am having regular meetings now with Welsh Government colleagues, NHS, PNI and the police on the resolution of that. This is a complicated issue. The vast majority of the demand does not come to the ambulance service at present. So there's something about how we get that demand to come into the ambulance service. But there are broader links then to the places of safety and the handover times that are experienced there in driving some of that behaviour. So I'll pause there, Chair. I recognise it's quite a large paper, so I have to take comments.
Thanks, Ross. Just on page 4 of 13 or 74 or 240, the chart at the top, that's quite stark, isn't it? Just looking at the improvement, the trajectory of improvement, but not everywhere. So I guess the question for me there is, what learning is taking place from one particular hospital site where we've seen dramatic improvements to others where there's still some way to go?
Yeah, so I think it's important to reflect, I guess, that the handover process is quite unique to every department. Accelerated design events being facilitated by NHS PNI for every site in Wales. We do have a breadth of delivery at the moment. Some sites have made real enormous amounts of progress, and others less so. So those conversations are ongoing. The task force, the clinical task force led by clinical executives of NHS Wales, is still running. They're regularly reviewing that work. The board is meeting and more information is coming out. There are discussions that are ongoing, and the Cabinet Secretary talked about them in his speech to the NHS Confederation around an automatic handover policy and the detail around how, when and if that would be implemented are being worked up.
Great. Comments and questions? Suzanne, Nicola, Rachel?
So, and then one sort of clinical point, so maybe we'll come back to it, but when the recategorisation of response approach classifies in different clinical classifications, was sepsis ever discussed as being in the time sensitive bracket for response? And maybe that's something to come back to, but
yeah, so I suppose we've used examples such as elevation and stroke. Stroke probably use this one because I guess it's the most easy to identify in a remote environment. I think the important thing to say here is what this change of approach brings is a much earlier clinical assessment of that patient's call. So patients rarely ring up and say, I've got sepsis, but they ring up experiencing a whole range of very severe manifestations of disease. And historically, that would have been assessed by a non-clinical call handler. It would have then had a code categorization that would ultimately have resulted in a defined level of response. What will happen now is, alongside that, a clinician will also scrutinise, review and make a decision on the appropriateness of that allocation based on the presenting complaint.
Okay, Ross, no, that's good assurance actually. And then the second point is on the improvement in ambulance handover. I suppose what we had was long waits to wait to hand over, and therefore a lack of resources to deploy into the community, and therefore long waits in the community. And that is the data I'd like assurance on, the waits in the community, because as we've discussed before, and you point at it in your group, that actually, even though some of the front doors are operating much better or well, the actual response rate in the community may not be all that significantly improved. So I think we really need to monitor that data. I'm sure you are, but at some point it'd be good to see that data.
So hopefully all your operational colleagues are getting daily subscription reports now because they've asked the same questions. I think what I would say is, in terms of the long waits, they are definitely coming down. The medians have also improved, but not to the same extent, because I guess there's a bit of gearing effect in terms of the total long waits. But there is further work to it. I guess, what I would say is handover levels are still roughly double the level of commission capacity we have available, so that limits it. But notwithstanding, there's clear expectation for us in terms of, on your behalf, holding WAS to account in terms of making sure that that freed up capacity is being directed.
Because that was my question really, was because if you've got a met need there, which that would represent, the question therefore of appropriate capacity to meet demand is still a bit fuzzy because you've got that gap in. So that's my question.
I think it's really important that we probably, we need to reflect that as handovers return, hopefully to a position that we all want to get to, there is going to be a period of reset of us understanding exactly what the system in Wales looks like. We've had probably a decade of extended handover. So one of the things we are seeing, and I'm sure your colleagues internally have raised, is they're probably feeling like more ambulances are arriving as some of that unmet need is met. What I would say is that the data doesn't indicate the sort of exponential or large growth in that, but I guess for colleagues who are also managing bringing patients in quickly, every 1 or 2 extra ambulances feels like a lot. So this is a system issue, and we need to continue to take forward. So I think why the task force and the representatives there are, focused on that. But we are providing lots more. Western have been really supportive in providing automatic subscription reports for your operational team, so they're able to see all of that.
Thank you.
Whilst your paper is sparking a lot of interest, so let's take a number of points, and then if you can sort of summarise them briefly on when we get there. So Nicola first.
Well, thanks, Ross. And I think as kind of we bedding down, and we've got lots of data in the performance report. I think having a really high level dashboard with probably 5-10 maximum metrics that tells a story for us as a JCC, right from 111 abandonment rate, lost hours at the health boards, the staffing, those, so we get a feel for the things that this committee is interested in. It is worth saying this in one bit of the system. So community response, handover delays is really important for us. There's then another story which we expect Welsh Government through 6 schools to pick up, which is, okay, so what's happening once you get in the hospital? But for us, we're interested in community response and lost hours. Just the other bit. So it's one of the most data-rich areas, and every set of data I look at has got a different definition, and the number will be different. And it's really different. So the handover 45 is really helpful and improvement. I have an issue with it because you could be 1 hour and 5 minutes, or 46 minutes versus 4 hours and 6 minutes. So the lost hours alongside it, or average handover time, is really important to see. So I think we can't lose sight of the lost hours, because I think that's possibly more impactful than just the handovers that got done within 45 minutes. The other bit is it doesn't tell the full story. So if you take an Iron Bev, and I know this is similar to other health boards, it doesn't include ambulances that come to the medical assessment unit. It doesn't include ambulances that come to the surgical assessment unit. It doesn't include ambulances that go to other hospitals that got those facilities as well. It could be some health boards, if you've got a bit of an integrated front door, you'll automatically be counting those. So I think we kind of got half a story, and so half is probably 3/4 of the story, but let's not lose, at the end of the day, ambulance results is ambulance results. So I want to make sure we've got the full picture in terms of medical assessment. And I was understanding that is work in progress that is due to come.
The daily reports are done now. They are coming out.
Okay.
Pitch dev, not here, but you should,
Might include assessment units, but we just need to. And it's likewise, I think the JCC weekly dashboard that comes out is really helpful. That gives you average time, so you can see kind of how that average, it gives you the average response times, isn't it? It's just really helpful. But again, if you look at those numbers compared to these numbers, it's almost like 50%. So again, let's get one version of the truth, one set of data that tells the story best for us in terms of and what impact it's having. So happy to support with that, but it's got all of the data there, but comes out in different ways with different definitions. Thank you.
Rachel?
Thanks, Chair. So just a couple of points generally, and I'll just come back on a couple of those points that Suzanne and Nick have raised. So firstly, I just wanted to say I think it's a good report. It's a really good summary of the work that we're doing with Ross and his team, and we're really pleased to be having our first proper kind of commissioner provider meeting tomorrow, and hopefully those will now be scheduled kind of on a regular basis going forward. So that's going to be a really big step forward for us. A couple of things I just want to say: a real thanks to colleagues for supporting that reduction in handover. That's really welcomed within WAS, notwithstanding, as both Suzanne and Nick have said, that there's still lots to do then to understand the kind of the impact of that. And one thing I was just going to pull out, I was in the 6 Goals programme board yesterday, and they had a really good set of data on falls. And what that was showing is that the number of conveyances for falls was increasing actually in some areas. And that's because as ambulances are released to get to more patients in the community, we're then doing the appropriate workup and bringing them into hospital where there's no other pathway available. But what the data was able to show is that the number of walk-ins for falls had gone down. And overall, they had a really nice picture. Overall, numbers of falls going into EDs was down. So it was. So it's, Nick, I suppose to your point, you've got to look at the whole system, haven't you? Sometimes it isn't just about just the ambulance bit of it. It's looking at the whole system. So I thought that was a good shining a light on an overall impact that some of this is having from a beneficial perspective. Just a couple of other things from the report, if I could. One is on the Manchester Arena inquiry. So great that I know we've done a lot of workshops together, and that work is being pulled together. I'm just conscious of timescales for this year's IMTP. So whilst acknowledging that you're bringing in an external review on this, the timescales in the paper do then mean that we're going to have missed potentially the opportunity to include any recommendations or priorities into next year's IMTP. So that's just, I think, something to think about. And the last thing I just wanted to say really was that really welcome the strategic review that's kicking off, and we're really kind of excited about the opportunities that brings. Partly, I think, to shine a light on some of those issues that Nicola and Suzanne have raised in a bit more detail. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. Conscious of time, so just a couple of observations. Shamim, then Paul.
I was just going to ask about the right care, right person, and the impact of the Mental Health Act reform, especially around people being held in police if they have a learning disability or are autistic and don't have a mental health condition. I just wondered if there was any link or any impact.
Let's hold on to that for a minute, come back in a minute. Paul?
Only a couple of things. I think Nicola's point about a high-level dashboard is a really good one. On what used to be the red indicators, recognise the value of moving forward, but the red indicator was a fairly clear one to understand, and I'm just a bit nervous that we might lose the ability to know exactly what's going on. Outcomes are important, but the process influences outcomes as well. So I just need to make sure we've got a clear set of indicators. I'm always also a bit nervous about medians because it misses your outliers. So I think having a clear set of data, high-level indicators that we can look at and tell a clear story, I think is really valuable.
That's Paul. Hayley, then I'll come back to you, Ross, summing up.
Yeah, thank you. Rachel picked it up, which was a bit of concern around the strategic review and our ability to build some of those assumptions into our IMTP in terms of alignment of timescale. In terms of the new ambulance performance framework, I think it's really good that it obviously the reporting will come through, but I am quite interested in how we take a perhaps more qualitative, broader evaluation around the new arrangements and lessons learned. So I'm quite interested in how, if we've got plans to do that, how we would do that. And then the final one was around the South Wales Major Trauma Network. I just wanted clarification. There's reference to issues with the TARN and benchmarking position. Just wondered when we think we would be able to start seeing the outcome of that work, particularly on the outcomes. Thanks.
Thanks very much. Ross, summing up.
Sorry, so yeah, close point of the high-level dashboard. Saya, myself, and Stacey's team are working on bringing that forward to the committee members. So hopefully you'll see that both reflected in the performance report, but alluded to in my report going forward. on Manchester Arena, yeah, which I reckon the timing. We will aim to, as part of the JCC's discussions in December, bring some early findings of that. So hopefully I can help that. In addition, we will need to make any considerations around that in the context of the broader financial challenges for the committee. The strategic productivity review hopefully does help support the definition work that Nicholas suggested around, and us being really, really specific on what our expectations are and what we're measuring in relation to ambulance services. On right care, right person, so we have a collective meeting now with Welsh Government, ambulance services, NHS PNI and police colleagues. One of the biggest challenges we have at the moment is the vast majority of demand is conveyed by the police without a request for assistance from the ambulance service. So we need to resolve where activity lies. We are all agreed on it that health should undertake those journeys and the transport where that's safe and appropriate. But there's I guess a system mechanism and behaviours that we need to address, particularly around the duty to consult and how we intervene earlier in order to prevent a 136. I understand there's some work ongoing around the Mental Health Act, which may help in terms of ambulance services' ability to take some of that forward. But I'm happy to bring more detail to that in the future. Oh, and Rachel, hey, sorry, yeah, just on the change to the model. So there is an external review of the model happening. It's a 3-year process. It will both look at the changes to the performance framework, but also more broadly the changes to the ambulance service around this clinical modernisation and transformation programme. So I'm joint SRO with Liam in WAST on that. We had discussions with the review team last week about bringing forward interim evaluations in order to inform future decision making. But hopefully they will look at that much broader qualitative and outcome effect as part of an overall system perspective. And we had a long conversation with them last week about the health economic assessments of those, which I think would be really important for us as commissioners.
Thanks very much. So I'm happy to note Ross's report, really helpful conversation. Just to get colleagues, we're running about 15 minutes behind, so we just need to make sure that we are focused perhaps in terms of looking at the items on the agenda. But Mel, over to you again.
I heard you. That's splendid. Okay. So taking the report as read, on a bit of a journey with the report in terms of what level of detail people want to see. So welcome any feedback on the level of detail in the report, and we can I can have a look at that going forward. I suppose just the things that I would like to highlight is we have moved into designated provider elements for the functional neurosurgical services for movement disorders, which includes deep brain stimulation, with a view to concluding that by March 2026. At the moment, that activity is carried out via prior approval. So this will put that on a firm footing and provide a solid commissioned basis for that. To note, one of the key risks is around the JACI recertification for CAR-T and BMT. We're expecting the report to come last week and maybe bring a verbal update to this, but we haven't seen that as of yet. So obviously once that is received, we'll bring some more detail back. Because there could be some significant risk around that depending on the outcome. And then to note the escalation of the specialised hearing implant services, because there's been increased waiting times because of some staffing issues with that. So I suppose to note that. And then on Shameen, your point on hereditary anemias, we know that this is one of the fragile services. It's a single-handed service. We're seeing an increase in demand. It is part of our commissioning intentions going forward in terms of making sure that it's on a firmer footing. But we're looking at the service in Liverpool as well and seeing if they're experiencing similar rises in demand and whether there's anything we can learn from that service.
Shameen, your point, yeah.
Also about there's something happening in South Wales. Is it just South Wales or is it wider than that?
So at the moment, we've noticed the demand rise in South Wales because of the capacity issues with the service, and that's why we're looking wider into North Wales to see if that's a wider pattern or if it's something we need to consider for the South Wales perspective.
And it disproportionately affects some minority ethnic groups.
Yeah.
Shameen, you had another point which is flagged linked to risk.
That was it.
Okay, cool. Right, perfect. Any comments or questions? Yeah.
Just around the JACI, if the certification is removed, just a reminder, just get in touch with us because obviously the urgent service change your proper line.
Yeah, absolutely.
Only two things. I'm glad to see at least the solve for the issue is a bit clearer. You manage to get hold of people. That's something they're doing. Conscious of the fact we're carrying a lot of risks in this report as well, which has implications for next year.
Yep, thanks. Any other comments? We note the report. Thank you. Moving on, Joanna, to the Adrian's report. Anything you wish to highlight? Assume we've read it.
Okay, yeah, just quickly in terms of Caswell, just to update the following concerns raised by lay members. In July, we've undertaken a full review of the service in September. As you'll be aware from the paper, the review identified a number of safety and quality concerns. As a result, the decision was made to pause new admissions and the services being monitored by the JCC escalation process. We received an action plan setting out the plans to address the concerns from Caswell at the end of last week. The exec lead at Swansea Bay and our JCC director continue to meet to oversee implementation of service improvements. And the JCC team will be meeting with the senior leadership team at Caswell weekly to support the implementation of the plan. So in the interim, whilst the admissions are suspended, Tila Welling is the priority in the first instance, and a full discussion relating to the concerns will be had at the December QSOC meeting, which is the 15th of December. And just briefly, in terms of St Andrews, again, the detail is in the paper. Just to highlight that the service remains suspended from the National Framework Agreement. And we continue to remind health boards that all Welsh patients should be reviewed regularly on a face-to-face basis by the care coordinators. We're also attending twice weekly silver and gold meetings alongside monthly IOG meeting where ongoing risk issues and mitigating actions are discussed. So we'll continue to advise members and health boards accordingly of any issues.
Okay. Thank you. Any comments or questions?
I've got a number of questions about the Caswell Clinic, but considering time, I'll drop you an email.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Thank you. Hayley?
Yeah, it was just really the timescale, recognising that the closure to new admissions is really the kind of expected timescale to resolve that, recognising the double running costs associated with alternative admissions requiring to be found, and also the broader capacity in the system in light of that. So I just wondered, do we have a timescale for when those issues will be resolved?
Yeah, so the action plan was received at the end of last week, so we are working through that at the minute. A number of the concerns have already been addressed by Caswell, which is obviously really reassuring. We've got the full quality safety meeting on the 15th of December, so it's unlikely that we'll make a decision prior to that. But following the meeting on the 15th, then we will make a decision in terms of unpausing of admissions and any change in escalation status.
Susan?
But just to say, as Joanne has described, we have a QSOC meeting on the 15th, and just to provide assurance to colleagues that this is a very key agenda for that meeting, and it will be subject to scrutiny. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess it's about making sure that we balance the need to make sure that the issues that have been highlighted in the report are addressed or are being mitigated, balanced against then the needs of ensuring that provision is available as quickly as possible, getting that balance right. Obviously, the matter for quality committee, but also for Joanna, you and your colleagues to make recommendations to the committee in the light of the progress being made. Stacey?
Yeah, just to highlight that obviously that does articulate a financial risk for the remainder of this year, but we are working with other providers in Wales, so North Wales, for example, to see if we can mitigate some of the financial risk with the use of our infrastructure elsewhere. So just to say there's been an all Wales approach to that. So thank you very much all.
Yeah, thank you, Claire.
Yeah, I think Stacey's just said it was our exposure in terms of this being a wider financial risk and a strategic approach to the future, given the kind of some of the time the Caswell Clinic issues perhaps have arisen from. So just for maybe for the committee, for the subcommittee to take that more strategic view.
Thanks, Claire. Abby?
Yeah, thank you. And obviously, my interest is that I am also the provider of the Caswell Clinic service. Just two comments. I think it's really important that in escalation, the conversations are having with the exec directors, not just the service team. I think that's in place, but that's not what I heard Joe just say. And secondly, coming back to the comment that was made in respect of the action log and infrastructure, this is one where the facilities are not fit for purpose for the full range of medium secure services that we may want to commission. So that does need to be a conversation that we pick up as part of the IMTP for next year. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Abby.
It wasn't clear, just to reassure that the exec team are meeting on a regular basis with the Director of Mental Health, so that takes priority.
Thank you. Nicola.
Yeah, it was just to pick up. I think there's been challenges getting the Mental Health Commission in the group with all of the health board leads. I think there's a meeting coming up in December, and some of that could be availability. But I think it's such an important group.
Absolutely.
If there are issues with health boards not making themselves available, then just reach out, because I think they haven't met for a number of months, and these issues are so important that to get this agenda moving.
Thanks. That's really helpful. If there are issues, they can be escalated to chief executives to make sure those are unblocked. Carol, then we'll move on.
Thanks very much. It's just a comment to underline the commitment that we have to work on an all Wales basis. So if there's more that we can do on the provider front from North Wales, please let us know.
Thank you very much, Carol. That's really helpful to have that option available. Thank you very much. Can we note the reports? We're going to move an item up for good reason, then we'll have a break. So item 4.3, the integrated medium-term plan. George, brief updates.
Thank you, Chair. So colleagues who will have seen a number of these slides before, but we did talk about them in depth at CCLG. So I make no apologies for rattling through a lot of it. I will share the slides with everybody afterwards because there's quite a bit of detail in there. But just to reassure everyone, we are taking forward conversations on a more detailed basis with your directors of planning and deputy directors of planning, so within the health boards. So I think Alex is with me and he has offered to share the slides. So while he's sorting that out, we will I'll just cover off the progress to date. So we've obviously agreed commissioning principles by the Joint Committee. We shared an engagement plan with you. We've started all that engagement in September, and we have had CCLG engagement, and we've got the commissioning groups within the JCC who are working with each of your respective colleagues in health boards. I'm also meeting with directors of planning across all of the health boards, commissioning health boards, and we've also linked in with Ian Langfield representing RSPPP, and obviously Rachel as well from ambulance services from a provider perspective. Thanks, Alex. So moving on then, just to remind everybody what our commissioning principles were as far as the IMTP is concerned. Again, I won't labour that. The plan principles is on the next slide, which we all agreed at a previous meeting. I am rattling through, and I do apologise. If anybody wants to pause, then please say. The planning assumptions, again, that we agreed, just a reminder of what they are. And the financial headlines, which we're all very, very cognizant of, is a challenging environment, and we don't need to necessarily repeat the context we're working in, but very, very aware that we are in a very, very challenging environment moving forward. Moving on to slide 7 then. So the system risks and the PESEL assessment that we've done, those new areas are highlighted there in the gold font. More than happy to talk through the information that we've gathered as far as that on the revision of risks, but they are provider-informed, commissioner-held risks. And then the next slide, our approach to developing priorities through the clinical lens. So we're linking very, very closely with our commissioning groups, but being led through Yolo's team from a medical and clinical perspective with Carol's input as well. Alex, would you like to come in on that point and add a little bit more before we talk about the Moscow model?
Just come off mute. Yeah, so we're using the Moscow model just to do an initial sort, and then we'll be moving then into So we've done that. The commissioning groups, following kind of meetings and with provider information, have done that initial sort of sift and sort of what kind of things are in the plan, taking account of the baseline, the foundation plan, what the foundation plan said, and then the risks coming through from the various discussions that we've been having so far. That will then move into a more clinically led approach to the review. So we're including our AMDs and our quality director into the discussion, so that we get a medical and a clinical lens on that. I know Rachel's raised previously, in terms of ambulance and how we look at that, what kind of paramedicine lens we've got. We have addressed that through I think Ross has confirmed that we have got an AMD coming in specifically for ambulance and 111, and one of the clinical team is the quality director has a ambulance background as well. So we have got that kind of clinical lens going through. So what that will then mean, if I go back 2 slides, is we should by the end of the month have got to a point where we've had a chance to look at all the information coming in. We've had provider risks in from our specialised services providers, mental health team are meeting with all your directors of mental health, and ambulance WASTA sending us in a review of their kind of key priorities and risks coming through. So that will be in place by the end of this month, and we then intend to start to put more kind of meat on the bones, if you like, trying to bring through what then the priorities coming through are, and what then the consequences are of that in terms of the financial envelope available. And now I've set up weekly meetings with our finance team to start to look through that more regularly, and they'll be bringing that through with your finance colleagues as well.
Thanks, Alex. So the next few slides, and there's quite a few of them, I think probably will need a bit of digestion outside the meeting. So we will share them. They're hot off the press because, as I say, they've been coming in through engagement meetings with health boards and also the commissioning teams as well. So more than happy to share those, but be assured we are linking in with your teams more locally. Alex, if we can skip to slide 21. That talks about the provider insights and health board plans. I just want to reiterate that we are working with colleagues to ensure that the first year of our IMTP is focused on efficiencies. Given the conversations we've had earlier this morning, it's really important that we not only drive out efficiencies, but make services sustainable for the future as well. So there's a lot of work focusing on that within the environment we're working. The key issues and risks that have been identified through our engagement so far are obviously demand and capacity, workforce challenges, the funding levels, obviously, and also that impact assessment on patient harm. And whatever it is that we can't commission as a JCC still sits with the system as a service risk. So we are also very cognizant of the fact that we need to support our providers and our commissioners in ensuring that those risks are managed as effectively as they can, and whether there's a role for the JCC in support of that. It is more of a strategic discussion really around collaborative commissioning opportunities, which we are progressing to look at our longer term role in supporting commissioners for that. The only other thing I would like to say and reassure people is that we are linking in to make sure that the JCC's plan is very firmly reflected in health board plans. So you will recall that we had feedback last year that could have been stronger in some cases. So we are making a very proactive approach this year to support health boards and make sure that that's up front and centre, and working with you to make sure that's very, very clear. So yeah, the final slide really is just a reminder, we've already put it up, but a final reminder of what our engagement process is and where we are on our journey to present and get a IMTP back to the Joint Committee. So we'll have something in draft form for January, taking on board all of the issues that we're talking about around EMITs and the wider other service priorities, with a view to bringing it back for final approval hopefully in end of March.
Nothing is causing you any significant concern at this stage in terms of delivery? Significant concern.
Significant concern is around the finances. We don't yet know what the planning guidance looks like. That's due out probably December, but we know what the assumptions are we're making in relation to that. So we're working on those assumptions. And I think there are clearly concerns around services that we won't be able to commission. So we'll work with colleagues.
Thank you. Stacey and Hayley had her hand raised.
Yeah, so just a couple of things really. So we're currently undertaking our detailed assessment of our current position. It's clearly a really bleak picture. Just thinking back to a conversation that we've had previously around some of those recurrent costs, they are largely linked to costs of patients receiving care. So, you know, I know we're developing a Moscow model. I think what we do need to do is be really clear on what our current position looks like before we start to go into choices and developments. I know that's something that we need to take into consideration as a committee in our next conversation. The conversation that we've had around directors of finance is that next year's financial position is looking worse than this year. And so we need to bear that in mind to see the choices and options. And what that does mean is that we're going to have to pull together, I think, a performance framework quite quickly in the new year that draws some triangulation to what is possibly deliverable and resources that are available. Currently, you'll see that the current way in which we're contracting and managing the performance of those contracts with our providers may not be sustainable within the resources that we have available next year. And so I'm working with directors here internally first to try and articulate what could possibly be affordable within the resources next year, given some of the messages that are coming out from Welsh Government around the money.
So is that saying to us doing what we've always done is really not possible?
So I think
So
the initial financial numbers are saying next year we're going to have to make some of those early draws difficult to choices in the IMT period, not in year. And I think that's going to be a challenge for us all, really.
Okay. And some of that will require quality impact assessments and everything. So it can be done in that.
Definitely. Yeah.
Okay, Alex, then Hayley, then Lee.
Yeah, it was just to note, Chair, on the that final slide, we noted that we were going to and committed to after the last joint committee strategy session to have an additional session in December. The 11th of December has proven very difficult for people because of various regional meetings, public accountability, etc. So we are canvassing kind of at this short notice whether there are opportunities to do that on a different date, either with CEOs or their DOPs representing them. So we're currently working with your PAs to try and find a date if possible. If not, we'll have to kind of get back around the drawing board, because I think we wanted that meeting to cover some of the tricky conversations that we'd had at the last JC meeting.
Thanks, Alex. Hayley.
Well, first, thank you. This is a lot of work, and I think the approach you've set out is clear. But I do think my reflection on this, we do have to look at this slightly different as we go into next year. And there are some fundamental difficult choices that we will need to consider from the outset. Some of the areas in particular, I welcome that workshop. So whatever we need to prioritise diaries to be available for that would be really helpful, because I think for me, it's about that likely allocation conversation that we'll have and what that means then in terms of the financial performance and planning assumptions that we need to pick. And I think also we're in a position where a number of health boards are in an annual planning cycle due to escalation and financial positions, versus then a position where we're trying to work through perhaps an IMTP space in the context of the JCC. I think the one area that jumps out at me in the slides, and I've got to absorb some of them a bit more, is our approach to commissioning, and in particular our approach to how we're going to handle whether we're allocating commissioner savings targets or whether we're actually going to look at the NHS efficiency measures type approach and actually building productivity and efficiency into our commissioning intentions. I know this is difficult, and I know it's going to be contentious. So I think those are the sort of key areas that I think that workshop we need to spend time together, because I recognise we also, with that equitable lens conversation we've had around how we handle various commissioning discussions, both within Wales and England, we're going to have to keep that in mind when we're looking at this as well, in terms of the very hard financial settlement we might be needing to plan against. So I'm quite keen to make sure we're able to prioritise. I mean, from my perspective, I'd be keen to try and get both directors of finance and chief execs in the room to have these discussions, because some of the risks, particularly our providers, will be carrying due to the deprioritisation or reprioritisation of what we need to do. We need to have that conversation up front.
Thanks, Hayley, and I'll come back to you, George, in terms of putting this together.
Yeah, so thanks for the update, and obviously we did discuss it last week with leadership. So I think this was the key things going through my mind at the moment is we're obviously in a very challenging environment for developing plans, your election will come in and so on. And as we mentioned, there's a potential for it to be a very difficult settlement going into the start of next year, at least to begin with. It is difficult, as we've already talked about, and we will talk about, to change course quickly. So to properly assess the decisions we'll have to make in order to get to a balanced position from April onwards, or at least through the course of the year, and enact that in sufficient time, feels like a very substantial risk to us as a committee. So I suppose the question that is posing in my mind is, are we actually in a position where we believe we can develop an integrated medium-term plan balance, or is the question more around what we do as an interim arrangement and to allow us the time to work through those points? Because I think if we were to reflect on this year's plan again, perhaps we should have concluded that we couldn't develop a balanced plan. So I'm not expecting a definitive answer to that now, but I guess it's a question we need to think through.
Stacey, George, I'll come back to you, then we need to move on.
So I think so I've reflected similar things. I know George is reflecting similar things as well in the context of the system itself. I think the likelihood next year of us reaching a conclusion on the money would be very difficult, particularly given where health boards are individually, and of course we are working for on behalf of all of the health boards as a collective. I think it'll be a difficult financial environment next year to get an agreement from the 1st of April, and that inevitably then has impact on people's agreement on things like LTAs, etc., etc. So it's a bit of a governance scenario planning thing that we need to work through, as well as a deliverability one, to be honest, because I don't know what that means in terms of the Finance Act. I don't know what it means in terms of the planning framework and so on and so forth, because obviously a JCC is not allowed to put a plan in which is in deficit. So I think it's one that we're going to have to work through in our workshop. Me and George, I know you've got similar thoughts, but
yeah. So really valid point. I know that a number of health boards are probably working on a 1-year plan, which puts us in a position where to plough on with a 3-year IMTP. And I have been thinking some kind of hybrid approach. You called it an interim arrangement. I think that's very logical, and I think we're going to have to work through exactly what that could look like in the workshop. So the point about having DOFs involved, I think that's really key. So we will go back around that loop and make sure that we try and find a time to dedicate to working through this really complex situation. In light of everything that everybody said, it's going to be challenging.
Really good conversation. Let's try and revisit that opportunity with chief executives now with DOFs and lay members present. So I think we've got to make sure that we're allocating the right amount of time to start to consider those more challenging conversations that we're going to need to have. We'll also do that in the context of the current planning process and what we know about what next year is going to look like. But I think where I've got assurance on today is we are up to speed where we need to be for now. we need to make sure that we are creating space and time to make sure we continue to be in the right space.
There's a lot to do. Yeah.
Yeah, then we'll move on.
Well, that we did talk about the EMERTs earlier and said, oh yeah, well, we have to put it into the MTP because that's what we have to do. Well, I was saying that's not what we have to do. So, you know, it reflects back on that as well, isn't it? And it's a bit late in the meeting in a way to say, yeah, we might not be doing an IMTP, do you know what I mean? Because we talked about it all the way through. And now we're saying, yeah.
I think we had to do an IMTP, maybe just could it be how the length of time?
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's not, you know, the money is a construct of the plan that you pull together. So it's the end product, isn't it, of what we're delivering as an NHS. It shouldn't be the driver of the plan for next year, but the reality is that we've got to deliver what we can in the resources that we have available. So it should be the tail end. I think what we are talking about is developing a plan. We absolutely need to be developing a plan for the population of Wales, if nothing else. So we need to be developing a plan. But we need to be realistic about how we afford that plan, I think. And I think the comments that I'm hearing, correct me if I'm wrong, is it may not all be possible to type that in and triangulate it all for the 1st of April. We may need to buy ourselves a bit of time to make some of those difficult decisions. And I'm not saying that's not the case or that, you know, that we can't do that. I think we just got to be pragmatic around the deliverability of the holistic position, if you like.
Okay. I think we probably had enough conversation for that for now. Let's pause there. Let's have a 5-minute break. I'm back at 2:45, and then we can move ahead with the rest of the agenda.
Yeah, okay, I'll just.
Could I be said, is the NHS leadership board I won't be able to do jobs. Just tell my needs. No, that would have called this.
As I said to you, today, we changed about 3 times. You only have put meeting.
No, I've seen this back sometime yesterday in my day yesterday, which was like being in.
Just got another story. It wasn't even an email.
Let's all start.
Yeah, I'm giving them that.
But
One all the get all of them.
Just need us to press on, and sorry, Stacey, it's your report in relation to finance and performance. Getting just give a bit of an overview, and then obviously we had a conversation in our closed session earlier.
Yeah, no problem. So yeah, just a bit of an overview. So we've worked really hard this year to try and de-risk the plan. You'll be aware that we started off the financial year with the £20 million risk. Our forecast position at month 7 is a £7.7 million overspend. It is largely linked to the non-delivery of savings, but there are some key overspends in other areas, mainly some of our cardiology services, and some areas related to drugs or blood products for individual patient care. You'll note from the report this month that we have included additional pages, so one pager including the key drivers. I think it'll be really important to keep an eye on that going forward, particularly into the plan season as we develop our current position. And also we've added some pages by commissioner so that quite quickly organisations are able to see the drivers of their individual positions. So hopefully colleagues find that helpful, particularly in finance teams locally. Clearly, we've had conversations about the affordability of the current overspending position, and it's clearly a difficult position in the context of the NHS Welsh financial position. And we have been asked to look at all opportunities to go further. So what we need to do probably as a result of the conversation earlier on and of the finance report in front of us and the asked to go further is to bring something back, quite a detailed proposal in the next couple of weeks for a decision by committee.
Thanks, and I think that just to reinforce the point that you made, so that we need to further mitigate the risk, and that the committee needs to see some recommendations about how that will be done. Probably at the meeting we've got scheduled on the 16th of December, which will turn part of that into a public JCC meeting.
Chair, just only a quick question. I'm conscious of the fact we've got a financial planning performance committee subcommittee before that as well. Don't know whether we want to use that as part of the assurance process.
That's the point. Okay. I know we've had a number of conversations at other parts of the day already around the financial position, but anything else anyone wishes to flag? No, we don't report anything in performance.
No, the report. We are iteratively developing the report as we go along. And I know alongside this, we have got the rapid review that rapidly needs to conclude in the next planning and performance and finance committee, but nothing to specifically note unless any of the individual directors want to pick anything out specifically and take the report as read.
That would have been pulled up in the director's report already, but any rapid, how rapid is rapid?
So the next committee gives us a sense of what needs to be done to deliver a performance report. We do have an ongoing conversation about the performance framework, but that's as a result of the plan for next year.
Does that pick up some of the points that colleagues have made, particularly around ambulance performance, in terms of what do we need to measure, and what are the sort of 10 key performance metrics would be useful to see to be good? That's all in one place.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Yeah,
right, thank you very much. So let's note the performance report as well. Moving on then to items relating to high cost medicines. First of all, Yolo.
Sorry to bring this as a briefing for what a likely announcement soon on that the threshold, the ISA, the incremental cost effectiveness ratio, the amount it's reasonable to pay for one improved quality of life adjusted year is going to increase. So NICE uses an ISA between 20 and 30,000. AWMSG in Wales uses the same. But there's considerable pressure to increase that ISA. There are 4 drivers. The Trump administration, prices for drugs in the US are considerably greater than here in most of the developed world, mostly because there's no health technology assessment of medicines, so the pharma industry can price what they like. As a consequence, the price is much higher in the US and it's much lower in other countries, particularly in the UK. There's the potential imposition of 100% tariffs on pharmaceutical products from the UK going to the US, and that's for negotiation. There's a strange thing called the VPAG, which is there's a scheme whereby the increased costs of medicines, there's a reimbursement that comes to the UK government. And that has been badly planned such that the rebate is much higher than the pharmaceutical industry would like. As a consequence, the pharmaceutical industry is very unhappy with the UK situation, and you will have seen in the late press there's been companies withdrawing investment into the pharmaceutical industry in the UK. The bottom line is that the UK government recognises they're going to increase the threshold. So NICE will have to include the threshold as will AWMSG. It's in the lay press that was in The Guardian about 3 weeks ago, where it's projected that the ISA may increase to 25 or 35, or the ABPI is pushing for 40 to 50. So that would be an increase in the threshold we use for pricing new drugs of between 25 and 100%. That will disproportionately affect the JCC from a specialised services perspective. A significant proportion of our budget is on medicines. Medicines inflation is greater than the rest of the NHS. It was roughly 7.3% last year, and the inflation rate in high-cost medicines is disproportionately higher again. So it's likely that this announcement will be in the next few weeks.
So you'll have a couple of points. So we're briefing us at the moment. That's the purpose of this paper. So we're cited on it. Once an announcement's been made, we could then have an understanding of the potential financial implications of
But
this.
it's just for new medicines. Old medicines won't be affected. Sorry.
And so just have a rough indication based on previous establishment of new medicine, what like the implication might be. I guess then also it's about making sure that Welsh Government are fully cited on this. I understand that they are.
Welsh Government I had discussions with Andrew and CPO on a regular basis about this.
And finally, do we need to add this to the risk register? So it clearly is a clear condition in this that we need to be thinking about how we manage and mitigate. So what that will look like is something we just need to perhaps wait a bit, but it definitely should be included on the risk register. Any other points, comments, or questions? So this is more likely to affect the JCC than health board colleagues, the services we commission.
Yola was mentioning that the rebate was non-hypothecated. Is there any pressure we could put on to get them to hypothecate it? It's not easy to say.
So we're going to discuss immunoglobulins in a second. Now, immunoglobulins is a very good example of it wasn't part of the BPAG scheme until 2016. And as soon as it went into the BPAG scheme, the cost of producing immunoglobulins was fixed. So as soon as you increase the rebate you've got to pay, the companies were very open. They said, whatever the VPAG is, we will add that to the cost of immunoglobulins. So JCC pays for the immunoglobulins. The cost went up by 15%. That came back to Welsh Government, but we didn't get that at all. I don't think we could try, but I suspect there'll be resistance.
Well, I think we should make the point.
So on a separate issue, we are meeting the Welsh Government on a regular basis on Friday, and one of the issues that comes up, back to the discussion about hereditary anemias, there's a gene therapy, we asked whether we can't deliver. Suzanne has very recently written back to me saying that the team can't deliver what's needed just to support the gene therapy. And I think at present there's no funding mechanism for Welsh Government to deliver gene therapies in Wales. So that's one of the issues that's going to come up. And I would argue that the BPAG scheme should support that.
Let's make sure that's recorded in the minutes, and so it gives you the ability to highlight the JCC's concern about hypothecation in the conversations you're having. Okay, let's note that and make sure that we include that on the risk register. Immunoglobulin.
Immunoglobulins committee will have seen some of this work before. It's just to emphasise that the rest of the UK, England, Scotland and Northern Ireland use a similar system for an online approval to validate the appropriate use of immunoglobulins. There's no such scheme in Wales, and I think the use of immunoglobulins is fairly unregulated. I use my words carefully there. If you look at the use in Wales, immunoglobulin level use has increased significantly. Meanwhile, in the rest of the UK, it's decreased. If we were to extrapolate to Wales, the use of the rest of the UK, is potentially saving about £5 million. It's worth saying that if we invested in JCC for that saving, most of the saving goes directly to the health boards rather than to JCC, because you as health boards are paying for a lot of immunoglobulins, but I'm afraid to say you don't know why. And so that we would be saving you, the 5 million would be mostly in the health boards rather than JCC.
So this is an initial investment of a post.
So we have identified an individual to go and scope this work, and I would ask that health boards So immunoglobulins are medicinal products, and so it's the directors of pharmacy who are responsible for immunoglobulins. So we will be engaging with the directors of pharmacy, but we would be grateful for Health Board's support in the scoping of how much you spend and why you spend it.
Yeah, it's a very sensible suggestion, but Nicola.
So we're saying an 8-day pharmacist could save us £5 million. Why are we not? Why are we only not doing that, given our problem? Give the answer up for the rest of the year.
Well, I think an 8-day pharmacist could save the Health Board's £5 million. So
It's all the same money, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just sitting in a different partnership. So
That was the attitude when we took it to CCLG, just get on with it.
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah. I agree.
I just wanted to, I mean, I don't have any problem with that. The cost of the 8A pharmacies, is it down at 20k in there?
No, so, okay, so the way NHS England run it, they have set up 3 apps, which are committees who sit and say, is this a reasonable use? So you've got some are very barn door indications, and you can just do that online and the committee just reviews what's been done. But a lot of it, one of my colleagues described some of the use of immunoglobulins as witchcraft, because there is no, you say, why are you doing it? Well, we don't know what else to do. And so the 3-app committee, which is where you have, it's run by an 8A, and then the 20,000 is the database that's needed to do this. But all the 3 apps are run by an 8A, so that's our plan.
That's fine. Just wanted to clarify.
I'm conscious we're meeting in public. So the medical director talk about witchcraft, you know.
Sorry. Well, I think a lot of it is unclear why these products are being used. Sorry, I apologise. Yeah. I was quoting someone else, not me.
That's useful clarification. Look, can we note report to be the recommendation? I think it's a very sensible step. Thank you. Great, thank you very much for that. We're moving on now to governance and assurance decisions. Sexual assault referral centres commission proposal steps. Again, useful paper.
Thank you very much. So I picked up the baton on sexual assault referral centres whilst we've been trying to organise a little bit the leadership sit in the senior team. So Claire Harding has joined the call. So Claire, please, I'll call you in a sec just in case there's anything I've forgotten to pick up. But you'll be reminded that on the inception of the JCC, we were asked to pick up the Commission of Sexual Assault Referral Centres as part of our standing orders. And since then, really, it's fair to say that we have been in transition. We have been in extensive conversations with NHS, PNI and the police and crime commissioners and the police in order to get this into the right position for it to be fairly transferred over into the GCC. There are a number of matters that are outstanding. I will take the paper as read, but there are a number of matters that are still outstanding, and we haven't really got it into a place where NHS performance improvement have handed us over a succinct transition plan, but we have, however, got the paper in front of us today that Claire have beautifully crafted together to help us navigate the next couple of months and what's needed. Claire, is there anything specific that you wanted to pick up today?
Stacey, if I can, just a couple of salient points for members to note, particularly the movement from a partnership governance model into one that better reflects a commissioning approach. That will mean a change to some of the stakeholders around the table, and we'll need to work strongly to ensure that we've got stakeholder and survivor voice actively captured and helping us drive future improvements. I think recognising also the financial position and understanding that there's some work to do at pace with regard to determining future financial plans, likewise a common service specification and performance framework across the 3 hubs that exist. So just to pull out a couple of those points that are going to give us really intense work over coming months, and to take any comments from colleagues as they wish.
That's a quick question I had in relation to the paragraph 3.5 around funding model. You say there's still some further work that's required. Is there any financial risk to the JCC?
Do you want me to take that, Stacey?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, I'd say there's risk across this programme for the JCC in the round, Ian. There's a lot of complex funding flows that are happening within the programme that we're trying to get underneath as we talk. And in December, we have a workshop to better understand those and build a financial plan for 26 onward. But yes, there are a number of queries that remain outstanding with regard to finances and quite who's responsible for funding which aspect of the model.
Because taking into account the conversations we've had today, is that we would not be in a position to take any additional financial risk, and so we would need to get assurance that the funding model was robust as this comes back through the governance process of the JCC.
Yeah, so I think what Claire is alluding to is that it is just unclear in the system at the moment, and we need to get clarity. The issue around whether the centres can be run with the funding available is a part 50-50 funded model with the police, and so it is a complex relationship, and so we do need to get to the bottom of it overall. But yeah.
So in the light of that, then are we content to confirm the transfer of responsibility for commission services from NHS performance improvement to us, and there's still a concern about the funding model? Yeah.
Question is probably a silly question. In light of the changes around the police and crime commissioners, what impact is that going to have, particularly around the financial element? I mean, SARC has been a nightmare for years in terms of it's been talked about, and I know that I was part of it in the very, in the distant past. And it's never bottomed out, and it's always the funding and workforce capacity issues that seem to be a blocker. So with that change happening, how confident are we we're not just going to pick up a real?
So we're picking it up as part of at IPQD on Friday with Welsh Government. The difficulty that we've got is we've to some extent we've got no option but to take it on. Yeah. We have been in an extensive transition process with NHS P&I. We've had to really our relationship with the police and crime commissioners and police. It hasn't been in a particularly healthy place in the last couple of months. And the last year, particularly, programme board arrangements fostered down and without sort of the proper governance around it all. And so I think this model really pushes us into a direction of commissioning, which is the right model. And it pushes us into a relationship where we can hold people to account and we can ensure that we've got those service specifications to enable us to deliver within the resources that we have available. So we do need to there's still some grey areas, and I think we're right to just point that out in openness and transparency. But we will be picking up the changes for the police and crime commissioners on Friday with Welsh Government.
Like I say, I think the revised governance framework that Claire's put into the paper is really helpful.
Hugh, then I'll go to Susan. I'll bring you in at the end, Claire.
I was going to say very much what Stacey said. I mean, although we are asking whether we're taking the recommendation to agree the transfer, actually the wording here is quite clear. We haven't really got any choice on this. It was in our establishment order. We should have taken it earlier. If I'm going to be frank with you, the handover from P&I is not what I'd expect a handover to be. It's taken a lot of undoing to try and work out where it is. I think the only assurance we can give you is we are working on the governance, and we will not commit resources that the JCC does not have. I think that's most probably. We are not going to sign up to agreements that people believe should be taking place if the resource is not. We don't see the cut of their money, as it were.
I think that's a really, really helpful statement as part of the assurance process. Susan, then Claire.
Indeed, Chair. Yes, that is a helpful statement, and provided that we aren't going to be forced into a situation which is going to grow in terms of resources required. I'd be happy to accept the recommendations, but with those provisos, Chair.
Thank you. Claire?
Thanks, Claire. I was just going to come back on Mandy's point around the police and crime commissioners and any associated risk. So both the sexual offence examination contract and the ISFA contract, that's the Independent Sexual Violence Advisors, are currently flowing through the Office of the
police and crime commissioners. So we will be picking that up as part of the December finance discussion, and the PCCs are in the room to help us work through that.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other points? Can we read the recommendations? Well, with the understanding that we're not going to commit resource we don't have, and that's really important. And as Hugh quite rightly says, that we have no option because it was part of our establishment. We would be responsible for sexual assault referral centres. Great, thank you very much. Moving on then to care home framework. Again, Joanna, please see you read first.
As I said, the detail and history to the care home framework discussions are included in the paper. So I'll just briefly summarise the background and the key points for decision. So the changes to procurement regulations in February 25 resulted in proposed changes to the framework. At the JCC in September, there was concern raised at these proposed changes, particularly the removal of the quality assurance process that we provide as a JCC at the moment, and the removal of the CCAP system. And it was agreed that additional options for the continuation of the care home needed to be worked up. 4 options have therefore been identified. They're attached as Appendix 1 within the paper. Option 1 is that the framework ends in March 26. Option 2 is the framework as originally proposed that came to the September JCC. Option 3 is the framework with the inclusion of CCAPs, and then option 4 is the framework with the inclusion of CCAPs and the quality assurance process. So both options 3 and 4 are costed options, with option 4 costing £52,000 per health board. So the options paper was discussed at the Collaborative Commissioning Leadership Group meeting last week, and option 4 was identified as the preferred option on an all-Wales basis. However, there was no agreement made by CCLG with regards to funding this option. So committee members are asked to consider the information within the report and to advise on preferred option for immediate implementation.
Thank you. And so this will be either we stop doing this, or we continue. There'll be no cost, or we continue to do this with one of the 2 options, and there'll be an additional cost to health boards for the delivery of this approach. Is that what I'm reading? Yeah. Comments or questions? Silence.
I'll come in if it breaks the silence. CCLG discussed this last week, and I think it was one good example, one of the first things to come through CCLG straight to JCC. So for the people in the room, we asked every health board to contribute. I think we had 6 to 7 health boards present, and I think there was uniform agreement that option 4 was the preferred option, that there'd be an all-Wales service and it'd be provided with us. There was various comments made about actually if that was funded by health boards, what the model should be, or the fact that health boards didn't think they should fund it because previously it was undertaken by the JCC. Where we are clear is, yes, the JCC did previously do this because some of the people in the team happen to have the skills to be able to do this. As time has moved on, we no longer have those skills. We'd have to recruit to those skills in addition to our establishment and the work we're doing. So that's where we got to. So there's a clear desire or clear recommendation from CCLG and all the representatives to move with the All Wales model and seek economies of scale for doing it once for Wales. However, the question mark remains that we can only do this as JCC if we have funding for it.
Claire, then Carol. Then
yes, I mean Hugh said it, and I think there was that there was just a recognition given the conversations we've already had about a very difficult financial climate and the decisions that we're having to make elsewhere around reorganising people and roles, about whether there was a mutual aid or a shared model, and I don't know whether the mental health group have therefore had time to adequately consider that, because I think, as was said earlier in the meeting, they perhaps haven't met as routinely or as fully with all members, and so that kind of recommendation from that subgroup wasn't as clear perhaps as it would have been if everyone had been at those meetings and that was functioning.
Thanks.
It's not very helpful. I recognise that's not very helpful. Sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Claire. Carol.
Yes, thanks very much. I've been around this a long time, and as the lead chief exec for mental health back 2015 onwards, I remember that there was actually quite a substantial team that led this work, and I'm wondering what's happened to that resource. I would also just endorse what Clara said, which is we really would want to have full ownership of the mental health leads in relation to this, and where care coordination and quality assurance can meet. So yeah, that was my question really. This is sort of option 4 appears to be the most popular option, but it's asking for more resource, and I thought there was a substantial resource already there. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicola.
Yeah, so I think just following Carol's point, it is worth us just being clear where that resource was, because almost like a dedicated team previously. So appreciated the skills issue. But yeah, so I know again the feedback, I don't think the directors of mental health have had sufficient time to consider or be in principle supportive of option 3 or 4. So is the feedback from mine. So I don't think it's at odds to that. And again, it's trying to be clear about the benefit this will bring by having that All Wales. And we've talked many a times around the opportunities of mental health commissioning. What more could we, where those savings opportunities are, and improved outcomes for patients potentially by bringing people back and having a more structured approach. So I think it'd be useful to kind of set out a bit more detail, the benefits of that, and what we would expect in terms of outcomes and financial, and then potentially pays for itself over and over again, hopefully. And so it lacks some of that detail in terms of the benefit that should bring that.
So because that was my sort of next point in terms of that investment from health was what's going to be the return, and can we extrapolate that now, or can we give a sort of sense of what that may be over the sort of next 3 years? That might then make the argument in terms of investment much stronger. But Hugh, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, this is difficult in some respects because the legislative and the procurement framework has changed all around us. So we are running out of time on this. The difficulty is, and I think people have alluded to this conversation, there has been a lack of engagement through mental health leads in the system. And we're coming back at this a second time, and we are really running out of time because our procurement colleagues and shared services basically are only willing to help us seek extensions if we have an agreement to the future direction on this. So that's, I suppose, the concern we've got here. I don't think we've got time to take it back round. And I think Claire's point was raised in CCLG, and it's a really helpful point. Most probably, what I don't want us to do is actually make a decision that puts it down the line another month or so, saying dependent on the discussions with mental health leads. I think we should be having a conversation. Do we approve it? Do we approve the funding for it? And in seeking the funding for it, the first call on that is to go to mental health leads and look at mutual aid sort of conversation. But what we don't want to do is go down, ask for that, can't find it, come back again, because we're running out of time on this. And I think the point that a number of people have made, in terms of what happened to the resource is the resource we have in the JCC now. The nature of the people who were in the team a number of years ago and the clinical qualifications enable people to do this. The team is fully occupied, fully busy at the moment, and we do not have the resources to do this. So yeah, essentially, if we were to fund it, we'd have to release some of the resource we've got now, deprioritise some of the work they're doing, and recruit into the clinical skills necessary for it. So I know that's a bit of an avoiding way of saying it, but we really do not have this resource. We would have to recruit to do this properly to make sure we can do it to the right quality.
Okay. So, yeah.
Well, all we've been saying is we can't spend any more money, isn't it? So I don't see how we can take it on. We haven't got the resources, as you say, to do it. And it's very important, though. These are people who, do you think they're underserved by, I don't know, people who deserve this help when you need it? I think it's, we'd have to, if we were doing it, we'd have to kind of rob Peter to pay Paul. And that's not something you can do in 5 minutes, is it? So I don't see how we can agree to it. If we don't agree to it, what happens is the individual health boards will do it. They won't do it as efficiently, maybe because they're not doing it, but it's not that people will be sitting in the street or a camper box or anything like that, right?
I think what the recommendation is that the JCC wouldn't be paying for it. It would be a separate. allocation to health.
Again, we're spending the health board's money. If they're in agreement, that's great. But if they're not in agreement, I don't see how we can do it.
I guess it's also, do we have the ability as a JCC to say to health boards that they should make an additional amount of funding outside of the IMTP and the annual plan? Nicola?
Yeah, so I completely agree, and I don't want to commit any more resource. So I'm trying to put my hands on it quickly, but we're probably spending tens of millions of pounds in this area, probably, I don't know, 50 million plus of placements that cost loads of money, and I don't think it's always the best potential outcome for. So it is that case. So rather than kicking into the long grass, for me, I want to understand you potentially could, through the quality assurance, take a couple of those packages down a couple of days, have an earlier transfer, it's paid for itself in one go. Yeah. That isn't in the paper, and I think the difficulty is we're committing that resource without that potential opportunity in the context of the sum of money that we are talking about here, and we could end up all going to put our own resource into this and spending more. Yeah. So it does need, whether we could say we need to urgently pull that work together without potential impact, get the health board, there's a meeting on the 10th of December with the health board leads for mental health, try and get the paper there, you know, and whether or not there's something that can come back to us offline to endorse it on the basis, as long as we can demonstrate it can pay for itself, rather than us put a cost in. But we need to monitor our investment in this area.
It looks like we're going to need to have a special JCC meeting on the 16th, when we've got a development session anyway, in terms of the financial position. We could, if this is doable, bring this back in terms of answering, you know, particularly the financial, the cost benefits of this. And that might actually then be the way of actually trying to take this forward today.
I'd like to think it'll help towards our savings next year.
Yeah. I'm conscious I need to step out to do a World AIDS Day talk for Public Health Wales, so I'll hand over to Paul. But Carol.
Yeah, thanks very much. I'd agree with that sort of last comment and direction of travel there. This has been a service provided by the NCCU and then latterly by the JCC for many years. So I'd want to be much clearer about where's the money gone, what's the problem now, and if there is no more money to put in, which we haven't got it, we've just discussed all of the financial challenges today, but we reprioritise the work of the team. If it's a skill base, then we can look between us, you know, in terms of the other health boards, how we might support that. But we've got to find a solution that isn't about more and more money going into what's been a core function over many years. So I'd be very happy to sit down and have further conversation about it. Thank you.
Okay, that seems, sorry, just catching up there. That seems a logical conclusion. Yeah, sorry, Abby. Susan and then Abby.
Thank you, Chair. Just, I would not want to lose in all the discussions in relation to finance today. I would not want, as a lay member, to lose the emphasis on quality assurance that this obviously, this provision, the service has provided over time. So I would just want to emphasise money, yes, cost benefit analysis, quality assurance that drives. You know, because I'm also thinking about, you know, the people who will be receiving these services. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Susan. Abby.
Thank you, Paul. Mine was a similar comment to one that's been made before. I do think for transparency, understanding the migration from what was in the team and those posts to the position we're in now. And if as part of the reshaping of the team, we've decided to use that funding as a JCC team in different ways, I just think transparency about understanding that. Notwithstanding that, I agree with Nicola in the grand scheme of things. There is benefit of us working together collectively in this way, but I think for me, on the basis that it would bring our costs down overall, and we would need to have confidence around that it is the benefit of doing it means that we drive those costs down. And I've just seen something today that came into my inbox earlier this morning around potential inflationary cost expectations in the independent care sector, which are going to be substantially above where we are likely to get any allocation. I think Hayley talked about it being flat cash next year. My calculation is it isn't actually flat cash if the budget goes through as it's indicated. It's actually a reduction, and therefore needing to make sure that we've got absolute value through the commissioning and that the quality assurance and the value and patient outcomes are all being regarded in equal measure as we go through the process. So the principle of having a service that delivers this, I don't feel I'm able to judge on whether that skill mix proposed is the right one. It's quite heavy, I think, in terms of higher graded staff, but particularly if we're going out to recruit, and what I would be worried about is where we would get people from to recruit, because they'll come from our services and deplete our services potentially. So there are a range of things in there, but I do think, Hugh, the transparency of if the JC team have made different choices about where the team resource goes, we just need to understand that. But agreement in principle, but I'm happy to support us going around the loop and bringing it back in the 16th of December if that's what we need to do.
Any more comments? Suzanne?
So not to prolong the conversation, so I'm happy to agree in principle here. I think consolidating and bringing expertise together must bring benefit. The amount of money that's required to support the service delivery is in the scheme of things less than, it's real cash. It's marginal. So I would imagine that if the figures are laid out, how much we already spend as a collective on all of this and what the opportunity looks like, this could be a cost neutral or even a savings case. And I think that's what needs to come forward in the next 10 days so that we can be clear what that opportunity looks like. But it cannot possibly cost more money to deliver this efficiency into this approach. It must bring benefit. And I think as long as that's operated within the end, because it's really down to you guys to decide how you deliver this, the framework. As long as there's a benefit realisation piece to it and we're able to track that, I'm happy to support it.
Thanks, Suzanne.
I know some of this will be local, but not much, but £86 million.
Yeah.
Spent on
we're talking
mental
about
health services. So apart from a few local services, that would be externally commissioned.
Okay. Hugh, do you want to pick this up?
I think I won't say very much. I think it's quite clear. We're going to aim to have an extra conversation on the 16th, I think it was. We'll look to take the route to get there through mental health leads. I think people have been reticent about promising savings, but I think we won't. What we can try and articulate is opportunities. The opportunities that this will provide, and put some quantification on there to give people the comfort. And we'll also go back and try and it's difficult because actually that analysis of where resource was many years ago in previous organisations is difficult to actually follow. And I don't want the team to spend the next 2 weeks trying to do an audit trail in terms of where resource has gone. But we'll do our best to articulate both opportunities from this and where the resource is currently being utilised, and we'll go through that process and back on the 16th.
Thanks, Hugh. So looking for a very tight piece of work to be brought on the 16th, taking into account discussions. Okay, thank you all very much. Item 5.3 we dealt with earlier. Moving on to item 5.4, neonatal services update. Ross, turning to you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So this provides an update in terms of the discussions we've held recently around neonatal commissioning. I'm a new player on this pitch, so very much getting up to speed. But I think it's fair to say colleagues who've been involved over a long period of time recognise there's been a number of areas of work around neonatal, notably phase 1 of the rebasing of neonatal services and subsequent agreement to undertake phase 2 review on the strategic service planning. That work was paused or impacted by the development and the establishment of the JCC and the subsequent OCP process. And then following that, notification was provided that the MAT neonatal assurance assessment would be undertaken, and therefore the work was paused. following conversations that Hugh and Carol had with the Chief Nursing Officer, there was a request for us to expedite some work around this area, particularly in relation to cot configuration and the provision of the neonatal transport service. So this paper really sets out and asks for the committee to approve the undertaking of a commissioning reset review, a baselining of the position we're at currently in order to inform your future decision making post-March, picking up both the current neonatal services that we commission and recognise the challenges around the neonatal transport service and the long-term interim model that's been in place for that. I'll pause there. Carol, I don't know if you want to add anything else.
I think I've summarised that really well. Ross, and just happy to take any questions.
Okay, no, thank you. That's really helpful. Thank you. With any thoughts, comments, Nicola?
Yeah, no, thank you, and welcome the kind of reinstating this work. So, at one point, I know I'd agreed to be a chief exec lead to chair this work, but was pretty much focused around the southeast. So I think as part of the work which you've set out for the early weeks is being really clear on the scope of the project, so that can inform how this governance structure and leadership we put in. And the other piece is, again, being really clear on kind of the case for change and the outcome drivers, the outcome measures that's driving this work, so that we're clear in terms of why we're doing it, and that's informed the scope. So it was just some of the conversation I'd had just before, when we were having some initial conversations.
That's helpful.
Yeah. So I guess in the interim period, whilst recognising the time we produced the paper and the committee, we've continued to undertake that work in terms of more detail on the scope. Yeah. So we'll finish refining that this week and then share that.
Great, thank you.
Suzanne.
I think what's not set out in this paper, probably you haven't talked about for some time, is what is the problem we're trying to fix? That's the question.
Ross, do you want to come back?
Yeah, so I guess from my understanding of the problem we're trying to fix is from a transport perspective, we've had an interim model in for a number of years, and there have been a number of attempts, I guess, to resolve that haven't ultimately delivered. So I think we need to resolve that. And secondly, I guess in terms of cot configuration, we talked previously about the meeting of the BABM standards. I think there's two elements of that in terms of both the capacity that we provide, the demand that those services are having, and the I guess the utilisation of that capacity and the frequency of events that occur in order to maintain those standards. So yeah, I mean, we'll outline in far more detail in the scope document that we share. But
I think you need some engagement articulating that. I think the issue is our neonates in Wales are not getting very good care, and sometimes their outcomes are adverse. But I think we need to be clear what that looks like, what the geographical disposition of that, and then we need to understand what are the factors leading to that. It might be transport, it might be capacity, it might be skill mix. What are the factors? Underlying well-being of women during the antenatal phase. I mean, there are lots of contributory factors, and then we need to work out which are the most pressing and where is the most opportunity for improvement within our. So that's one, because another rebasing of the cot system within the existing is not going to fix the problem, and that's why it's not been resolved in all this time, because we haven't really agreed what the problem is we're trying to fix. We've got a solution in mind, and I think we do need to sort of, I think rapid work is good, but I think the first thing is, what is the problem? I've just given you an example, but I could be well off being in it. And the Chief Nursing Officer must have had a problem in her mind that has brought an escalation. What was that?
Okay. That's a really good example of the planning that we're talking about. We need to do differently, maybe. You know what I mean? This kind of, oh yeah, gosh, that sounds awful, let's fix it, as opposed to, what is the problem? What are the drivers? What other things could change it? What should we be investing our time and attention in? I think that's exactly, well, it just sounds to me anyway, as a layperson, it sounds like the sensible way forward.
Wendy.
Yeah, a couple of things. One is the timescales, because obviously this says a 12-week plan starting the 3rd of November. We're now the 25th November, so I'm not quite sure if we haven't already done the engagement with both providers and families and others, then we're already running late. So we just might need to think about that, because that level of engagement and commitment to engage is going to be really, really important. The other is, which has just been picked up, I think Suzanne said it, about the link across into the CNO work stream around maternity and neonatal care. We can't do this in isolation. It's got to be linked up really, really, really well. And there was a third, and I can't remember what it is now, so I won't say.
Thank you. I think, correct. Oh, sorry. I think part of the conversation is that going back to the what does the chief nursing officer, there will be recommendations coming out of the review. And the conversation that Carol and I had with Sutranka is actually our agility to pick up those recommendations. And so this is a bit of rolling the pitch when those recommendations come out. Our understanding is the recommendations will come out by 1st December. And the Cabinet Secretary will expect a response to those recommendations by 31st of March. So partly what we're doing is going to be, hopefully, and I think the prep we're doing is being agile to pick those up. We can take the scope so far, but I think there's a question mark at the end of the scope based on what comes out in those recommendations. And that's what we're trying to do. And it is rapid. And what's got to be clear is that we will be getting to 31st of March without a fully consulted on plan. It will be recommendations at that stage through JCC that we'll have to go through further stages then.
That's helpful.
Really a quick point is it's just about where the neonatal network fits into this, because obviously there's capacity there. They do a lot of work around the pathway standards and assessments against that. So it makes sense for them to be absolutely connected into this work to support us.
Thanks. Mel?
Yeah, I think I suppose just to reflect on that ongoing and consultation piece of it. This is a rapid reset, aiming to answer some of the questions that you posed, because the phase 2 for the neonatal programme was set some years ago. So this gets us to a point where actually we can say, well, this is what phase 2 will look like, and that will have a longer period of delivery. At the moment, what this is focused on is what we commission, those tier 3, level 3 neonatal cots. But we know that the configuration of those is dependent on the configuration of maternity services and consultant-led maternity services and those sorts of things. So understanding some of those interdependencies as well to be able to get to that exactly what you described.
Thanks, Mel. Carol?
Yeah, and I think, Suzanne makes a really good point in terms of, making sure that we use the opportunity of what the MAP neonatal programme comes out with, or the MAP neonatal assessment comes out with in feeding that level of work, in terms of making sure that there isn't the duplication, that there is using one set of data, so that goes back to sort of our baseline assessments. And again, the neonatal network and the work that they do, I think, is key to this as well, and joining it all together so that we're not doing something separately, but we're using that information to inform us. So is there a need for a pace for change or not?
That's a really helpful discussion. I'm looking at the timescales and cognizant of what you said, Hugh, about wanting to be on the ball and ready for outcome of the CNO's review. But at the same time, scope governance is really important. The timescales. What's the thoughts about timescales and process? Because clearly we're going to have to look away from sort of update what's in the paper.
I think this work has started. This is the timescales we're working to, and ultimately it's to bring something back to the March JCC meeting.
Well, what's the process for the scope governance? Where is that, and where has it been?
So you're handling it. So it's with across JCC now standing up the programme delivery plan. So we picked that up. This outlines, I guess, a broad 12-week plan. There are more than 12 weeks between when we planned and when we need to make a decision, recognising that some weeks we may not make progress. There's other pieces of work to go on, but we'll refine that now with the PMO team. I think what's fair to say is reaching across the JCC, supporting this work from PMO, from Mel's team, Carol's team, and myself. So we'll bring back that detail in terms of the scope, and I think we've defined in the scope document around the role of CCLG as sort of the group that will take that.
Okay. Yeah.
Can I ask a question? It's because I don't know. I've not worked in the NHS before this appointment or anything. The pre-election period will commence at some point. Does that affect the things that we can publish, or are we just like sailing above it like a swan?
At the moment, we are expected to keep working in terms of the timescale. So for things like IMTPs, which are pre-31st of March, my understanding is the pre-election period comes in on the 8th of April.
Right.
So therefore, this will be, there may be conversations nearer the day about how it's handled. But we need to have those. At the moment, we're still working the business as usual until 8th of April.
Quite a lot of the things we've discussed, funnily enough, are happening around then. So there's going to be a lot of.
And that's the difficulty is that's the challenge that whole of the NHS faces now. And the likelihood of a programme for government being published by whoever the ruling party will be, or the majority party will be, before summer recess is most probably very, very tight in any case. So I think we're all working on the basis that we can't stop what we're doing and we have to work up until that deadline.
Forgive me for asking that question.
Thank you all. Really useful discussion. So we're asked to approve. Sorry, Abby, missed you there.
Yeah, it's okay. No problem at all. I know it's hard to keep a track on screen. Just a plea to make sure that we use the work that's been done previously, because there has been a lot of work done, and the network done a lot of work on the reviews. So for me, it's fact check and challenging why anything might be different from some of the work that's been done differently. So I'm happy to support and will ensure teams are engaged in the conversation, recognising the type programme of work articulated, and we can really help with things like which families to engage, because we'll have a load of families that we are already engaging as part of our review work. But that point about there has been a lot of work undertaken previously, and just need to make sure we don't repeat work we don't need to do.
Thanks, Abby. That's a really helpful comment. Any other comments around the table? Okay, we're being asked to approve the undertaking of the commissioning reset review for South Wales. Everybody content? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, moving on to item 5.5, corporate governance report. Aaron, just asking to note, I guess.
Yeah, it's just a note that the general overview of the report, but also support the approval of the amended standing orders and sort of changes to the IPFR policy. They've gone around the corporate governance directors group. They're all supportive. You will be seeing similar updates in your board packs for your health boards, and just for approval. Obviously, with our standing orders forming an appendix and next to your standing orders, so yeah, just ask them for very minor changes to both documents.
Okay. Any comments to note and approve? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I do want to say what I said before. If you're making these things available to the public, at the moment, it's really hard to find your way around these things. Is there a way of improving that kind of page numbers? The fact that there's very many appendix ones not help anyone. That.
So on the websites, they're added as separate documents, but
Yeah,
I
okay.
take your comments that we probably should.
Just have a look at it as somebody who doesn't work in this stuff every day. Just have a look at it as if. Anyway.
So that's where we make use of admin control, which does help with sort of referencing to papers and accessing individual papers. But I think by sharing the PDF separately, it becomes a bit more convoluted.
I've got 4 sets of papers downloaded for today. I mean, even for somebody in the NHS, I was wondering which set was for which.
Nice.
And
Fair feedback. I'll take that on board.
yeah, and there comes a meeting book, and you can't get into separate. But there's all sorts.
I think some of it is IT related, because I'm having a bit of trouble with my downloading as well. But we'll have a look.
Updates. Fair feedback.
Feedback's helpful. Thank you all. Susan, you're on mute.
In the same vein, just that there's a green marker pen, but that's in the PDF versions on page 3.
That was intended to highlight the changes that will be made.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
That's helpful.
Okay. Okay. Happy to note and approve. Moving on, nothing else. Moving on to item 6, IPFR panel report. Just noting. Yeah. And also on the Welsh Kidney Network, just to know. Abby.
Just on the IPFR, I know we're just here to note it, and I get that this is just a very high level report from the chair, but I guess for me, this feels like it's a one-sided perspective because it doesn't talk about the financial implications. I mean, I'm just thinking back through to the conversation in the finance report around this is an area where the kind of overspending against nominal budget is a concern in terms of where this sits. So it's just a reflection, really. It feels like it's one aspect of this rather than the totality. And I just wonder whether that's something that we need to consider going forward. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll take that forward. But there's consideration given to IPFR at a QSOC committee in a bit more detail, but we can look at how we're feeding that detail into that report.
Yellow. Yeah. Okay. Just on the Welsh Kidney Network, it's only a brief comment from myself. I'm sort of the lay member picking up interest. I've already had a really useful discussion with Mel and Ian, and trying to tee up a chat with David as well. My diary has been the problem. But no, that's been helpful. And no.
And I suppose just to know, this is the last time the Welsh Kidney Network report will come separately. It will come in as part of my report and come in through the Specialised Services Collaborative Action Group in the future as part of the chain of governance. This is the last one of the old governance.
Thank you, Mel. Okay, on to item 7, concluding business. AOB, I haven't had notification from anybody else. Anything you want to pick up? No. Review meeting. Everybody content? If you've got any comments, you can feed them back afterwards as well. Appreciate it. Date for next meeting, 27th of January, but obviously we've got the meeting in December to look at other issues. Thank you all very much. Much appreciated.
Yeah.